My entitled extended family demands that they be allowed to build an entirely new house in our backyard. And now that we're being told about this literally at the last second, my aunt is on her way to try and sort out the details. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so honestly, how do I even start this? A few years back, I think maybe about 2023, we started having some issues concerning the house we currently live in. The usual family drama caused by golden children, namely my aunt mainly at the moment, of who gets the house and etc. when grandma passes away. There's been fights concerning putting legal paperwork in order, to my grandmother and aunt wanting to sell the house right under our noses, to wanting to take the whole basement that's currently my brother's workshop, where they would toss all of his stuff out to make an apartment for my aunt and uncle when they come to visit here. They have plots to throw me, my mom, and my brother out of the house, to even my aunt accusing my mom of mistreating my grandmother. We've had everything happen practically, but recently some things came up that really made this so much worse. My grandmother came back from staying with my aunt and uncle for the holidays out in the States, and this is where she apparently put them through heck and back. And for reference, my grandma is a huge narcissist, but somehow, despite all of that, my aunt and grandma made plans to build a house in the backyard for my aunt. And this is all without telling us until the very last minute. So it starts off like this. Me, my mom, and my brother are in the living room when my grandma comes down and says the following. My grandma says, "Grandson, I would like to talk to you." My brother then jumps in with suspicion and says, "What do you want?" Whenever you start a sentence like that, it's because you want something. But my grandma said, No, I just wanted to ask you a question, just out of curiosity. Your aunt wants to build a house in the backyard. Would that even be possible? Well, my brother then raised his eyebrow, already smelling the next round of family conflict. He then said, well, you could, but it would be illegal. And the house would just most likely collapse because, for one, there's a sewer drainage system back there. Secondly, the ground back there isn't solid at all, so it's a big risk making a house back there when the ground is sinking. Third, you can't just build a house right behind this house, because you'd have no proper exit in case of emergencies. Also, you'd have to segregate the land, and both mom, uncle, and you would need to sign that you're giving that part to my aunt. And also, you need to get permissions and permits to build back there if you want to do it legally, which will be near impossible. Then again though, it's not like aunt is gonna listen. She'll do what she wants even if someone is telling her that's a bad idea. Now at this point, my mom and I are just silently listening to the entire thing, and we're actively thinking in our heads, oh man, here we go again. Because trust me, this is just the beginning of our troubles. My grandma then says, oh, well, you all sort that out with your aunt. I cleaned my hands of this. I have nothing to do with this. Middle daughter, you talk to your sister. And then after that, my aunt texts my mom something along the lines of, hey sister, so I've been thinking about building a house for myself in the backyard over there. You know, since I'm not getting any younger here. My health isn't great at the moment, and if anything happens to my boyfriend, I won't get the house. And the house will go to his kids, and they'll most likely just sell the house. And then I won't have anywhere to go. I've been thinking about this for a long time now, and I brought it up to mom, and she's on board. And I already talked to our brother yesterday, and he's okay with it. But I really can't wait any longer because of my health. I've been waiting to get the basement for 5 years already, but it's like pulling teeth with you. I really don't understand what your deal is. You always act like we're attacking you, but we're not. I don't understand why we can't all get along like family and communicate properly. If it makes you feel better, brother has agreed to give up his share of the house and give it to you. But here's the thing, all of this was a complete lie. It turns out she had been already talking to a guy to build the house and made plans for what she wants it to look like, and because she has the money for it, she had this thought out for a long time now. And we only know this because my brother found out from our second cousin. Now supposedly my aunt is coming out here to sort all of this out soon, so I'm honestly so worried about how this is gonna go down, because at this point, I really don't know what to do. Your aunt is unbelievably toxic. Think about it for a second. She's like, oh man, I've already talked to your brother, I'm gonna build a house back there. I just want to communicate properly, like seriously, what's the problem? And it's like, yeah, I wonder why we can't communicate properly. And it's like, oh, I don't know, maybe it's because you want to build a house in the backyard? For starters, the brother in this story literally said everything I was thinking. The house is not gonna be solid, it's gonna fall apart, there's no drainage or like water system. It's like, what are we doing right now? This is crazy. Is she gonna tap into the other house to try and like siphon energy off of that? Like, this lady is so selfish. This is so dumb. And it doesn't help that the grandma's like, okay, I'm washing my hands of this. Because it's like, wait a second, you've clearly been colluding in this. You've obviously been like having discussions about this in general, and now you're gonna try and be like, oh, I have nothing to do with it now. This is no longer my problem, see ya. It's like, no, I don't think so. That's not how this works. If you're in for a penny, then you're in for a pound. So yeah, your aunt is incredibly crazy. She really thought she could get away with this literally by lying to your face, especially when she had everything set up already. And I guarantee you, if this went south in some kind of way, where the local government got involved and said, hey, you can't build a second house next to this other house, she would then suddenly turn into this big victim of the situation and somehow try to blame it on you, your mom, and and your brother. You know, the people who live there and occupy that property. So seriously, for the sake of your family, I hope all of this gets worked out, because what you're going through right now, in my opinion, sounds incredibly obnoxious. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My mother bought me a present for Christmas that I have explicitly stated I have no interest in, and now I feel very stuck and I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, I'm 29 years old, and my mother got me a pair of Birkenstock sandals for the summer for Christmas, and I absolutely hate them, and I've told her this before. I sound so ungrateful and I hate my attitude, but it's also what I know this represents. She keeps going on about these shoes, and every time before she gave them to me, I said I have no interest in them, which is the truth. I have sandals already which do me fine, meaning that I did not need new shoes. Well, she has her own, and I feel she's trying to inflict this on me. Well, every Sunday when I would see her in the summer on a day off, she would comment on what I was wearing. She would say, "Why are you wearing sandals?" Or on another day be like, "Well, at least you're wearing sandals today." And at this point, I'm already dreading the summer now, because I know this will be the existence of every Sunday. She'll say to me, "Good, you're wearing your Birkenstocks. They're great shoes, aren't they?" And I have no choice but to go along with it, or else I'm going to be seen as the worst person in the world. I have stated on so many occasions that I do not like the brand. I don't find the shoes comfortable at all. I'm also trying to improve my spending and saving habits, so I refuse to buy things I don't need a duplicate of and cut down on what I don't need, basically making this quality over quantity. And that's another reason I can't stand having the new shoes. I know I didn't pay for them, but I also do not need them. My current ones work perfectly, even at around 6 years old. I wore them all summer long and I love them. I went to Rome in August doing around 30 to 40,000 steps a day, and they really were ideal. She does it constantly with 2 pairs of shoes that she has already bought me. Whenever I wear them, she comments or asks, "Oh, you're lucky to have those shoes. Are they not super comfortable?" And she does this every single time. And look, they are only shoes. It's absolutely harmless, but it's still very strange that she has to do it every single time. I think my issue lies more with what I know this represents rather than the shoes. I remember looking at them when I got them in the box, and there's even a separate toe slit as well, which I completely detest. I feel so ungrateful because her intentions were good, and she spent a lot of money too. So seriously, what do you think? Why is she trying to push this onto me when I've said I'm not interested? What should I do? Okay, honestly, I do think I understand where you're coming from, but also it really does seem like your mom cares about you. Like, I think you're reading this right by basically assuming, yeah, she means well and this really was supposed to be a good thing, but that doesn't ignore the fact that you really don't want them. You seriously just don't need these things. And I also can't ignore the fact that she is constantly talking to you about this, because if that were me, I would be super annoyed. So I know if I was in that situation, I would probably try and go about this in a casual way and try to go around her in a way where it's like, yes, I'm wearing them to satisfy your need to see them, but also I'm going to mix it up and wear something else. And if she does try to be like, "Wait, where's the Birkenstock?" you could just be like, "Oh, I decided to switch it up today and wear something else." And just try to keep it casual overall, regardless of however she acts. So yeah, hopefully this works out, because honestly, I can completely understand why you would be getting frustrated. An entitled Karen comes to my grocery store demanding that we cook a turkey for her so that she can have it for Thanksgiving. But despite the fact that we have signs literally all over the store explaining to her that we're out of product, she still was not having any of that, choosing instead to act incredibly entitled and very obnoxious. Here's what happened. During college, I had 2 jobs. One was at a pizza restaurant, and the other was at a localized but very prolific grocery store chain. Think a few hundred stores all in the same couple of counties in the same US state. I primarily worked in the deli and hot food section of the grocery store. We had a very nice commercial rotisserie oven that we could spit something like 30 chickens on at once. Now, for the chickens we used, and it is crucial to note, were not taken from other stores' meat section, but they were shipped to us separately from the supplier. They were sized up, contained packets of the seasoning mix that we were supposed to sprinkle on them, were already pre-cleaned, and had been mechanically drilled through so we could easily spit them onto the large rotating arms of the commercial grade rotisserie. This last step is crucial, because if you try to force an improperly prepped bird onto one of those very large spit arms, the odds are high the bird will fall apart into the oven and start to burn up and smoke. Usually, we cooked enough chickens each day to meet everybody's demands, but every once in a while when we had an unusually busy day and ran out when it was too late to make more, we would have a customer bring a whole chicken from the meat section and ask if we could cook it. Well, mercifully, we would explain all of the above, plus the fact that we weren't going to run the entire expensive oven for just one bird. People would then typically say, "Oh, okay, I understand," and then leave without pestering us further. In fact, most people began the inquiry by saying, I know the answer is probably no, but here's what I want to do. So overall, they weren't too disappointed. Sometimes we'd get a remark from our manager afterwards about how we should have prepped more birds, but that was all the extent of it. Well, with that bit of context out of the way, this is where our story starts. It was well publicized that this chain of stores around the United States during Thanksgiving offered a pre-cooked meal special. But here's the thing, you had to pre-order it well in advance. The reason being is that part of that special involved us stocking a fixed amount of turkeys that were specially prepped for the oven, just like our chickens usually were, and that way we could cook it in the rotisserie. In fact, we would have a special crew to stay after closing the day before Thanksgiving just to cook these turkeys and their accompanying sides overnight. That way people could just pick them up Thanksgiving morning. Once we had taken enough pre-orders to account for all of our turkeys, we couldn't take any more orders because the supplier wouldn't send any more turkeys. This was well publicized in all of our TV ads. This was also on signs on the door and the deli and the cash register, not to mention the website. I mean, if you name it, it described it. Well, one year we were swamped with pre-orders, and in fact, we actually ran out of pre-drilled turkeys about 10 days prior to Thanksgiving, whereas usually it's about 3 or 4 days prior. My manager, foreseeing potential disaster, bought some really bright neon colored paper and wrote in black bold letters that we could no longer take pre-orders and that we were out of turkeys. He posted these signs all over the store, every entrance, every exit, the frozen section, the produce section, the butcher, the dry goods, and of course our own section in the deli and hot foods. Well, we get through the next couple of days just fine, and his plan seemed to have worked. But then, the day before Thanksgiving, an entitled old Karen enters our story. And yes, she had that certain haircut. Quite literally with one of my manager's childish neon with black letters, you can't possibly miss it signs right next to her. She starts giving off this sob story and starts begging and pleading with me, trying to somehow get a Thanksgiving meal pre-order in for her. I try to be as nice to her as I possibly can, initially thinking that she's distraught, but then she suddenly runs off. I think that's the end of it, but then she comes back with a truly gigantic turkey from the frozen meat section. She looks at me and says, "Here, I brought you a turkey, put it in with the others." Now, at this point, I have to take a deep breath and try to explain why I can't do that. The bird isn't prepped, the bird is too big and won't cook at the same speed as the others, and I also don't know how long she's had it out of the freezer, so it's also a sanitation issue. Not to mention that it's not drilled through, and I would tear it up trying to spit it. Well, she's having none of that. She just keeps on whining, "You can't be out of turkeys, there's so many in the back. I'll get a smaller one, I really need this." And naturally, I'm thinking to myself, why did you even think you would be able to come in the day before Thanksgiving anyways, when the store is slammed? Plus, the ad said, "Order now, order soon." And we've got signs saying that we ran out of turkeys 9 days ago. But of course, I can't say that. Finally, she swears under her breath a little and then she leaves. And I was just glad that it didn't go worse. But I know for a fact that she complained to corporate because, of course, my management came up to me and said that I got a complaint. I hate people who act like this, like seriously, it's just so annoying. There's no other way of putting it. They have signs plastered all over the store. "We don't have any more pre-orders, I'm sorry, but you can't get it here." And yet this lady's like, "Oh, come on, my situation is specific and just completely out of the ordinary. Cook this turkey for me because I need it right now." And it's like, seriously, your lack of planning is not my emergency, and I am not going to be held hostage by your stupid decisions. So yeah, that entitled Karen was very stupid, and I'm so sorry that you had to put up with that. An entitled teacher demands that I get out of a classroom earlier than I signed up for, as she claims that she needs 15 minutes to prepare her stupid lesson, thus putting me in a really bad spot. Here's what happened. Okay, so I work at a college as a teacher's assistant and as a tutor. I only do science classes, but I am an assistant for one particular science class. I have my tutoring sessions in a room in the library twice a week for 30 minutes. Because it is a difficult class, we go quickly to cover everything and take up the whole 30 minutes. I also signed up for this room at this time before the semester even started. And let's say this was from 11:30 until 12 o'clock. On my very first day, I was told that I would need to be out exactly at 12 because there's a class after me. And I think to myself, okay, that's no problem. It takes me 1 minute to pack up and get out of the way. Easy peasy. Well, 15 minutes into my first session, this woman walks in looking very confused and asks me what's going on. I explain that I'm having my tutoring session, and if she's waiting for the class, it starts at 1. She then goes back and forth with me, perplexed about what I'm doing there, and finally mentions that she's the art teacher and she needs 15 minutes to prepare for her class. Now, it's a huge room, so I said I didn't mind if she gets ready in the back half of the room. Now, I was well within my rights to tell her no, that I have the room until 12, but I'm a nice person. Well, every single session, her students start coming in 15 minutes early, and I nicely tell them they can sit in the back of the room and that their class will start soon. fine. It's a little disruptive, but it's not too bad. We're all getting into the swing of things after all. The art teacher, however, will come in early and very rudely tell me I need to hurry up and be out early. And she is so rude and condescending. She comes in and interrupts my session that I signed up for, also that she can start her class early. I understand that she needs time to prepare, but if she needed 15 extra minutes, then she should have signed up for 11:45 and not 12 o'clock. And she can't expect to just kick out whoever's in there. I am so fed up with her unprofessional and rude behavior. I've talked with my supervisor about it, who says I'm in the right and I have every right to be there until 12 o'clock. But it's all really frustrating. I'm thinking of sending an email and sending it to my supervisor and her supervisor, but I don't want to take that route. I just want to do my tutoring in peace and go about my day. I hate that she thinks she's entitled to the room during my time, and at this point, I honestly don't know what to do. Oh man, I think you absolutely should raise this to the next level, because this idiot is literally interrupting your session. She's walking in there 15 minutes early and saying you need to hurry up and get out. Like, in my opinion, at that point, it's time to elevate this immediately. Anyone, and I mean anyone, talking to you like that is completely out of line. It would be at that moment I would be like, oh, you want to talk to me like that? Well then congratulations, I'm gonna get petty and weird. So that would mean if you're not a part of my tutoring session, then congratulations, you're not gonna be in my classroom, because the way she's treating you is absolutely unprofessional and you do not deserve that in the slightest. My idiotic chef at the job I work at complained to corporate that I was slacking off and not doing my job. So I decided to get some petty revenge by exposing the fact that this guy doesn't do anything at work either. And I've honestly never felt better about getting back at somebody in my life. Here's what happened. So I got hired as a line cook when I got out of culinary school, and it was for a big hotel chain. I got hired for the day-to-day work, and we had 8 other line cooks and a head chef who was always bragging about his workload and how he spared us from the paper monster. The head chef was, for a better word, absent from the kitchen floor and basically was a pencil pusher. He did the ordering, the stocking, the timesheets, the rosters, as well as the schedules, and communication with HR, the general manager, and he made all the menus. For the most part, the work paid okay, and there was not much hassle. Thing was, the menus that we had to cook were outdated and very uninspiring. And when I say uninspiring, think about a cookbook from 70 years ago. That's basically what I'm talking about. At some point, we as a kitchen team were done with that, and we requested that we make the menus. And the head chef for some reason was happy to oblige. So now here comes the kicker. We had an after-hours menu with simple meals: BLT, pizza, salads, soups, fries, hamburgers, and for some reason, corporate decided that the after-hours menu had to go, and it's going to be replaced by the normal day-to-day menu. Well, this led to the following situation. Almost nobody ordered food during the night shift. It turns out when people come to a hotel late, they are either too tired or too drunk to eat a meal that takes around 15 minutes to serve, or they're in no mood for sauteed salmon in white wine sauce. This went on for like a year, and corporate saw the nosedive in the night shift revenue across the board, and they made the only logical decision to combat this problem. They fired all the night shift line cooks, or relocate them to other hotels if they could not be fired. Of course, the after-hours menu was not changed, nor was it removed, and instead it meant the shift had to be picked up by another. So this is where the tale really begins. I worked there for about 2 years, and I got into some trouble with the head chef as we didn't see eye to eye. This then led to the following situation. I had to pick up almost every single night shift. I would come in at 4 in the afternoon and then leave at around 5 o'clock in the morning. I worked 40 hours on paper, but in reality, I worked around 50. I didn't mind as overtime was paid out, and me as a 21-year-old could do a lot with the paid out overtime. But the thing was, it was so boring. In the beginning, I cleaned the kitchen, checked the walk-ins for spoiled goods, set up a part of the breakfast, and did some minor paperwork. After about 3 weeks, I ran out of work to do. Every 2 or 3 days, I could clean something or check the fridges, but what at first took about an hour, now took like 10 to 15 minutes. So I did the logical thing and I started reading books, watching Netflix, talking to the night manager, starting to experiment with new recipes, and just hanging out with the interns. Basically, I just messed around on company time. So after a while, I got called into the office by the general manager. I got a verbal reprimand for slacking off. When I asked him why, he told me someone told him what I did during the night shift. So of course I explained to him what I did, and that in between these hours, I had very little to do. This led to a discussion between corporate, my general manager, and my union about what I could and could not do within the position that I was hired for. But at the end of that entire ordeal, I was tasked with the kitchen paperwork, and chef just unloaded his whole work week onto me, telling me to get to work and that the time for slacking was over. He said this all smug, and apparently he was assuming I would not finish this or I would come begging for help. I had to do timesheets, order produce, and answer emails. Chef was always bragging about the work and that it took a whole week, but after one look, I knew he was not familiar with computers and the various programs he had to work with. So within a month, I had figured out that our time management system could be linked to our payroll system, and I only had to check if the breaks were logged correctly. Then I would hit the sync button and place the request for validation by my general manager or human resources. The same went for ordering software. I could upload a produce list and order from an iPad while walking around to different walk-ins and freezers. Also, I combined this with the 2-day spoil check. Within 2 months or so, I found out that the work schedule sheet could be copied to another week, and with another software link, I could sync up our human resources app so it would automatically generate a warning when someone was on leave or on vacation. It took me 2 night shifts to do all of the above, and the other 3 I could easily just slack on. Well, due to this, the chef had nothing to do in the office, and in turn, he was also slacking. He had literally nothing to do during the day, but just sit around in his office. Well, after about 2 months, somebody, and sure, I don't know who it was, slipped this info to the general manager, and after that, the chef had to work in the kitchen, and his 9 to 5 completely changed. He had to do breakfast shifts as he failed to do line cook work, since he was stuck 30 years in the past when sticking everything in jelly was a trend. Soon after this, corporate got wind of this great innovation and asked our chef to document this all and send this over to them. When I left the company due to other reasons, corporate was contemplating cutting the head chef's position and making somebody else the manager responsible for the kitchen. So all in all, I'm so glad I got back at my chef because that guy ruined a really good job in my life. My mother despises my fiance and is threatening to cut off communication with me if I proceed with our engagement. I am recently engaged and my mother has been throwing a fit. My fiance and I met in early 2020 via Bumble. We had an instant connection and I couldn't have been happier. After an argument, we separated for about a month, but after several conversations and hearing each side out, we got back together much stronger than when we started. My mom hasn't been happy since then, over a year later. I'm a teacher and on spring break 2 weeks ago, he and I took a road trip to go snowboarding at various resorts out of state. At the beginning of the week, I had told him that there was a date coming up that was difficult for my family. It was the anniversary of my grandparents passing. This happened over 20 years ago, but my mom still wallows in sadness every year. I told him that in recent years, I had been making it a point to do something good or happy that day so that it wouldn't forever be associated with something sad. He proposed to me 2 weeks ago on that day, and of course the first person I wanted to call was my mom. She didn't pick up. I texted her the picture he took of me with the ring, and she just wrote back that she was stressed at work that day, but that the scenery was nice. I texted back asking if she noticed anything on my hand, and she replied, "Oh my God." She then called me and said that today was not a good day, that she was swamped at work, and that I knew what today was, and that she can't handle any other thing being thrown on her plate. I told her that I would call her later that day, but ultimately I didn't because I knew she would make it about herself, which on my engagement day, I didn't want to deal with. When we got back from the road trip, my fiance dropped me off at their place. It was a chance for me to talk with them one-on-one. She wanted to see the ring, commenting on how beautiful it was. I also showed her and my dad the video of my fiance took of the proposal. She then took out their wedding album and showed me pictures and asked about what tentative plans we had. I told her that we picked out a venue, the place where we proposed, and that the date was going to be August of 2023. She then said, "Okay, well that's a while from now. Plenty of things can change between now and then." When I got home with our dog, my fiance suggested my parents come over for breakfast so we could properly celebrate the next morning. They agreed, and the minute they got there, my mom completely ignored him. My dad went up to him, gave him a hug, and said congratulations to him. Instead of anything from my mom, she went into wedding planning mode with me and making a guest list saying I need to invite people that I haven't talked to in years, simply because they're family, and essentially saying that it's absolutely necessary. I told her that I want to keep it to less than 60 people, and with everyone she's included, I had over 60 people on my invite list alone. My fiance is South American and has a few friends in the United States, and we're working to get some of his family members to the States. Either way, his list is about 15 to 20 people, and she didn't even take those folks into consideration. She would also ask me questions about what color we want to use or what he wants to wear, and I keep suggesting that she ask him directly since he was 10 feet away from her making breakfast and wanting to be a part of the process. She barely acknowledged his existence the entire time. After breakfast, my mom and I took my dog on a walk, and she asked me, for probably the 10th time since we had been back together, what changed with him? I told her, like every time she asks, that he and I had a long conversation and are happy with getting back together. And if she really wants to know what changed with him, she could ask him directly. She hates confrontation, so I know that's why why it's never going to happen. In the time that she and I were gone, my fiance was at home with my dad, and he discussed with him that he's here to stay. He will take care of me, and he knows that there is some kind of awkwardness between him and my mom and wants to fix it. My dad said to let it be, and she'll get over herself at some point, but that my dad has no problem with him and is happy to call him his son-in-law. The next morning, I was dropping off my dog on the way to school to my parents. I calmly told my mom that I didn't appreciate how she ignored my fiance's existence yesterday when we were talking about the wedding. She replied, "It was intentional." I told her that he wants to be a part of the planning process and he wants to sit down with her and clear the air. She was playing a game on her phone the entire time I was saying this and said, "I don't care about his feelings. I want nothing to do with him." Since then, a week and a half later, my mother has been giving me the silent treatment. She and my dad's anniversary was earlier this week, and I said happy anniversary to them, and he said thanks. She didn't even acknowledge that I was there at all. She was staring at the television, completely ignoring me. I told her I loved her and I was leaving, and still absolutely nothing. This morning, I wanted to at least see if she acknowledged me, so I went to where she was getting ready and told her good morning. She said, "We need to disentangle ourselves financially from you because I'm done. You don't want to hear what I have to say. I don't agree with him. I don't agree with the engagement. I think you're settling. You seem to prioritize him over everyone else in your life. If you need me in case of an emergency, I'll be there. But otherwise, day-to-day things, I'm done." I told her that we'll talk this evening when she and I don't have to be at work at a specific time. I'm at such a loss for words. She has pulled this behavior too many times and I'm over it. I have suggested therapy since I truly think she's been depressed since my grandparents passed away. She loves to dwell on the past. Yes, therapy costs money and she's very stingy with her money, but it doesn't mean you're weak. I've gone to therapy several times and it has done wonders for me. If she doesn't get her way, she throws a fit. She refuses to let me be an adult and make my own decisions, whether or not she's okay with the decision. She can't stand the fact that I don't need her to be successful and that I'm starting my own life and creating my own family. Yes, I have relied on her and have valued her opinion and taken into consideration with things in my life, but this is just too much. I've gone to Google, of all things, and it sounds like she has some kind of narcissistic personality disorder. But when I go to talk to her this evening, I have no idea what to do. I plan to hear her out and not react. I'm going to stand my ground and maintain an even tone. I know that she is saying a lot of things to hurt me and get a reaction, but the more she does this, she's going to make a rash decision to not attend my wedding and regret that for the rest of her life. There's absolutely so much to unpack here, but first and foremost, the mom is absolutely in the wrong. This woman is clearly happy with her fiance, and the fact that her mother is being this childish and ridiculous is absolutely unacceptable. And while I think the woman in this story knows what she needs to do, to make it more clear for anybody who's listening, this lady does not need anything to do with her mother. She is 33 years old on the verge of starting her new life. And from the sounds of it, her mom's been pretty abusive and toxic most of her life. When she gets married, this is legitimately the first day of her new life with her husband. They both love each other and they want to have a wonderful future together. And I really hope the mom in this story chooses to be a part of that future instead of whatever she's trying to be right now, because nobody deserves this kind of treatment. A crazy Karen and her family threatened to unalive me at work. I used to work at a go-kart track arcade type place. Most of the people who work there are anywhere from 15 to 19 years old, me being 17 at the time of the incident. Because of the age of the employees, I can understand why someone who's much older might feel a little cautious about our dependability and ability to follow the rules. But I can assure you, we never messed around and we never broke any rules, even with our dumb juvenile brains. For the most part, we were really good workers. I specifically worked the go-kart track. We had an outside and indoors track. I was working the outdoor track at the time. A big family of about 10 to 15 people walk up to the line and start getting into the go-karts. I stopped the one child and asked for her height because she looked too short to go on the go-kart. Turns out she was well below the height minimum, and I told the crazy Karen that her daughter can't drive, but since the go-kart is a two-seater, she can ride as a passenger with someone else in the car driving her. This Karen and her husband were not having it. Apparently, they were there earlier in the day when I wasn't working, and the employee working there at the time let her daughter drive. I explained to her that my coworker made a mistake by letting her drive and shouldn't have driven the first time, and we will figure out which employee that was and reprimand them. I then told her that her daughter is allowed to drive the go-karts on the inside track because they are slower, and we let shorter, younger people drive them because of the increased safety. So if she wants, they can go in there or stay outside and just have her daughter ride as a passenger, whatever they want. And I guess today this evil, crazy crazy Karen was not having it. Instead of being understanding and just making her daughter ride as a passenger, she told me she was going to slap me and my coworkers, who were also working on the track at the time, and then later saying she was going to unalive us, all while screaming at us and making a huge scene. I figured this was beyond my power, so I called my manager over to mitigate the situation. When my manager gets there, evil Karen and her husband pull out their phones and start recording me saying how I was being racist and derogatory towards them, and that because I was wearing my school's wrestling team sweatshirt, they figured out my school and were going to call them to tell them the horrible things I supposedly said to them. They also said they were going to post the video they took of me doing literally nothing and post it on social media. Now, I'm a pretty big guy, being 6 foot and 230 pounds at the time, and having multiple years of football and wrestling under my belt. I know my boundaries very well, and I know what I am capable of. Combined with my temper, I knew that if I had to stay around much longer, it would get ugly. I was in no mood to be putting up with their garbage any longer, so I quickly left to go clean inside and calm myself down. It wasn't my problem anymore now that my manager was there. Apparently, they went back inside to scold the owner of the business, my boss, and the crazy Karen recorded her and gave her the same treatment she did to me, and the owner ran out of the building, a sobbing mess. My manager eventually lets them ride for free on the inside track, and they shortly left afterwards. The worst part was that the owner and the manager blamed it on me because apparently my large stature might intimidate people, and I need to be extra careful when people speak to me, and vice versa, which is totally ridiculous. I'm a calm guy most of the time, and I've always been very nice and courteous with employees, especially this terrible Karen. The fact that I didn't explode in tears at a little bit of confrontation puzzled me a little, and made me wonder if my boss should be allowed to be criticizing me, since she can't hold her things together. Never heard anything from my school or saw anything pop up on social media that led me to believe that they were just manipulating the situation to get a free ride, which my terrible manager gave them, instead of kicking them out or calling the cops like they should have. That is a horrifying situation to be in. These people literally threatened to unalive this guy, all because their daughter was just too small for the ride they were going on. Absolutely craziness. And the worst part about it is that the owner and the manager blamed the guy that was being yelled at. These people should have been banned immediately for life. Shunned, publicly shamed. You don't treat teenagers like that. At the end of the day, this guy needs to find a new job. And if he does decide to stick around there, he needs to call the police the next time these people come in, because nobody deserves to be threatened over something so simple and mundane. I lost all my money to a cryptocurrency scam after my friend's hacked Instagram account referred me to it. This began on Monday morning and has tainted my mental state as well as humiliated me to my friends and family. I'm a 20-year-old male that recently started my electrical apprenticeship. I haven't had much money in my life, but I finally started to feel comfortable buying things for myself: tools, clothes, food, etc., as well as planning to buy things I've wanted for a long time, like a new phone or a new guitar. So on Monday morning, I was working on the top of a high-rise with a lot of downtime in between tasks. During some of this downtime, I received an Instagram direct message from one of my buddies that I usually talk to a couple of times per week. He always sends me stuff he feels I would be interested in, so it wasn't exactly out of the ordinary when he sent me a message about how he invested $500 into Bitcoin and made $6,700 back. He provided a picture of his own phone showing the lock screen with notifications that $6,700 had been deposited into his bank account. His phone background was correct, so it seemed incredibly legit. Me, being the relatively broke and hasty fellow that I am, immediately inquired if it was real. He claimed it was and sent me the mining account he invested through. I know almost nothing about cryptocurrency and even about investing in general, so it seemed credible enough for me. I decided to invest $500 and followed the supposed steps given to me by this account in between work tasks. I wasn't paying too much attention though to what exactly I was doing. My lust for the chance to make a profit was far too tangible for me to stop and think. I continued sending money and following steps until Tuesday morning, when they claimed that I had not followed instructions and that I would have to upgrade my account to proceed. The upgrades, of course, started at $2,000 and went upwards. This is where I finally realized what I had done. I had already sent them more than $1,500 when I told them that I no longer had that kind of money and that I couldn't pay for it. They then tried to get me to send a smaller amount. This is when when I was sure it was a scam, and a depressive, dark mood fell upon me immediately. I called both my bank and the police, providing evidence of chat logs and the steps I followed. But as the money was sent through e-transfers, they bluntly told me that the likelihood of getting the money back and pressing charges are very slim. They are currently investigating it, but my hacked Instagram account continues to message everybody I know, presenting them with the same scam. I feel so ashamed and have taken multiple blows to my intelligence. I never once stopped to think that I dug myself into a huge hole. This is such a scary story. This is just evidence that you absolutely have to be careful with what you invest in. Something like this honestly could have happened to anybody, and thankfully it was only $1,500 that this guy lost. It could have been much, much worse. I know lots of people who invest a lot of money into cryptocurrency, but if you're gonna do it, you have to do it legit. And to be honest, getting a message from anybody about some shady deal that you can get by investing just a little bit of money and expecting to get this unbelievable amount back is most likely a scam. So you absolutely have to be careful where you put your money, or else you just might lose it all. My new boyfriend is making me choose either him or my mom. I've recently started dating again, and in a short amount of time became exclusive with this one guy. We've been dating for 3 weeks, after becoming exclusive at the second date. We enjoy hanging out and dating, but I can't spend as much time as he'd want me to, because I also have to take care of my disabled mom. My mom is 70 years old and has, among physical issues, some mental health problems as well. She also has paranoia and tends to have outbursts if I spend long amounts of time somewhere, especially if it's with somebody that I haven't known for a long time or that I don't know well. I typically need to call or text her periodically just to reassure her. Recently, I've had to delay a date because I've needed to help her with some things. All this related to her physical health, as well as a lawsuit that she's currently going through, as well as to wait for a good opportunity to leave her alone for longer than usual. It's something I have to basically prepare for because I approach the subject when she's in a good mental health space. My new boyfriend thinks I'm choosing my mom over him and is basically putting a wedge into our relationship until I disobey my mom, if that means anything. To me, this isn't a question of obedience, but that I'm trying my best to maintain a relationship and at the same time cope with my mom's deteriorating health. But he thinks she is ruining things because she's the reason that I can't date or visit him any time that he'd like us to. Does he have a point? Does it look like I'm clinging to my mom or that she's manipulating me and I'm actually in the wrong for thinking I can balance both relationships? It's never occurred to me that this was an issue because it never came up with any of the guys I've dated previously. They were okay with me taking care of her and delaying dates if it was necessary. They themselves would delay dates in order to attend a friend's party or take care of a visiting relative or do overtime at work, and I never held it against them either. What should I do? This new boyfriend sounds very toxic. I really wouldn't second guess yourself because this sounds like a really big red flag. It sounds like these are true colors slowly starting to leak out of him. I totally understand wanting to be there for your mom, and obviously that's a priority. And the fact that this guy can't understand that is really kind of disturbing. In my honest opinion, I think she really needs to determine whether she wants to be in this relationship or not. It seems like this guy's trying to wedge himself into an area of her life that he has no business being a part of. And in my opinion, she should probably just kick him to the curb. My girlfriend says that she's ashamed that I work for Uber Eats and DoorDash. First of all, I should say I am a foreign exchange student. That's why I can only work 20 hours per week, and the money I get for my job is not enough to pay for my rent, food, and university tuitions. So I get some help from my parents, but for some personal reasons, I can't ask them for much, and I am planning to ask for no money from them in the future. So I ride around on my bike and deliver food using Uber Eats and DoorDash with any time I could spare. With added benefits from getting some extra money, I also get my cardio in, and honestly, it feels great to ride around in the area, discovering new interesting places and restaurants where I could take my girl on a date. Now onto the subject at hand. Me and my girlfriend have been dating for 7 months. One day, she tells me she feels ashamed that I deliver food, and she is afraid her friends will humiliate her if they ever find out I deliver food in my free time. I honestly don't know what to say to this. I told her to get new friends and she got angry with me. She also said that I should get a real well-paying job and do something else? Well, I am trying to get a new job with better pay, but it takes time. And I am trying freelancing, but I can't build a decent portfolio because I have to study to maintain good results in university. And with her concerns of me eating only one meal a day, I said that I always struggled with my weight in my childhood. So one meal a day helped me to keep my weight down, while I can cook and eat whatever I want without any worries. There's no reason to say I don't eat much because I am poor. Well, she's then implying I shouldn't be dating if I can't find a real job, or until I graduate from university. I feel devastated hearing this. I would say I'm not a bad partner by any means. I always dress the best I can and spend time with her whenever she and I are free. I also went out together with her friends and we had a great time. They had no complaints. Is this such a deal breaker in a relationship if someone works at Uber Eats or DoorDash? In my own personal opinion, this guy's girlfriend is not being very nice to him. It sounds like this guy's doing the best he can with the situation that's been placed in front of him. It also sounds like he doesn't have a lot of money. In fact, he only eats one meal a day. So he's doing the best he can while still trying to maintain good grades in university. Like, this guy's working. He's working as hard as he can to get through school, and he's working hard to make money for his future. If she can't see that, then that's really unfortunate. At the end of the day, a job is a job. It's there to make money. And sure, you would love to pursue your passions for a living, but sometimes you just have to put your nose to the grindstone, make money, and get by. Overall, I really hope this guy finds the support that he needs, because from the sounds of it, his current girlfriend is just not there for him. Today I messed up by nearly blowing up all of my roommates when I tried to heat up a frozen can of soda. This happened during college. I was in my shared apartment lounging around when I had an inkling to have myself a Coke. I go to the kitchen and pull a can out of the fridge. This refrigerator did not ever seem to know the difference between refrigerator temperatures and freezer temperatures, so it was kind of random what you might end up with. And on this particular day, I hit the reverse lottery and found myself holding a frozen can of Coke. But I wanted Coke and I wanted it now. No worries, I had a solution. What I needed was some quick heat, and conveniently located next to the refrigerator was a stove. I should note that I excel in situations like this, because in no time at all, I had whipped out a pot with some water, some blazing high flame, and in the middle of it all, one soon-to-be unfrozen can of soda. Plan in place and executed perfectly, I went back to the living room to watch some TV. It's really kind of up for debate whether subconsciously I knew it would be a good idea to be anywhere near that kitchen, because the bomb, as they say, had been lit. From here, I don't really have a concept of how much time passed. 2 minutes? 10 minutes? However long it was, my world was quickly punctuated by a literal explosion. I had no idea what happened. A gas leak? A plane? I jumped to the floor to avoid doom. Very quickly thereafter, and while I'm still on the ground, my roommates came running into the living room. Dude, what happened? My senses slowly coming back. It kind of dawns on me that this may have been caused by my idea to basically light pressurized carbonation on fire. We run into the kitchen, and to this day, I still cannot believe what it looked like. There was soda, sticky soda everywhere. But where was the can? The can was gone. Bits of aluminum had been blasted into the walls. The ceiling, full metal shards, literally half in the wall, half out. We literally stood there, mouths gaping at the apocalyptic scene our standard college kitchen had become. I still sometimes think about how lucky I was. I could have easily unalived somebody, or unalived myself, or my roommates who came into the room. Imagine if I had come in a moment earlier to stir the thing, head poked over it. I still get chills about it to this day. Yeah, this guy wins the Darwin Award 100%. This could have been absolutely horrible. He literally avoided an explosion in his own kitchen. I mean, I can't think of a worse way to go. This guy literally just wanted soda, but instead he nearly caused a funeral. An entitled Karen tried to hit my brother, so I slapped her in return. This was a few years ago, and I was really young. I can understand that back then I was an irrational boy. Back then I was 11 years old and was with my mother and my younger brother, who I am very overprotective of. You see, that day, my mother and my brother and I went out on a day out in that well-known town in France. It was July and was pretty hot for a mountainous area. I could see everyone was pretty frustrated. After a long day of walking around, my mother left me and my brother in our car while she went to the shopping market to get some groceries. It was right next to the place where we parked, and she had done that many times before. This was France, and it was generally normal. So we were alone. It was quite busy, so we had one of the most convenient parking spots. We were just minding our business when a pregnant woman about 40 with her daughter, who looked rather young, pulled up right right next to us, blocking the one-way road. Keep in mind this road was rather busy. She rolled down her window and started knocking on the back window. I, who had control over the car, rolled down mine. Immediately, she started giving us a pep talk like we were her children in French. She visibly saw we were confused as I only spoke a little French at the time. Unfortunately, she knew English and started barking at us.
Why are you parked there in a spot next to the supermarket? Can't you see I'm pregnant and clearly need that spot as my child and I want to shop?
Remember, the spot we parked in was not for priority citizens, and we paid a pretty expensive fee to have it for the duration of our time there. And also that I was 11 and my brother was a fragile 9-year-old who got pretty scared already. I responded, "I'm sorry, but my mom is away shopping in the supermarket, and I can't do that." She looked me dead in the eye.
Okay, give me your mom's keys and I'll park you down the road where there are plenty of spaces.
I was shocked, and my brother returned a shallow suggestion, saying, "Then why don't you park down there?" Her face turned bright red. She started yelling at him and how he should respond with respect. The line behind her had cars building up, and some of them started beeping loudly. She was literally blocking traffic. Then she got out of her car and reached to hit my brother in our car and to reach for the keys in the car. I yelled, "Get away from my brother," and slapped her hand hard with all of my might. She started screaming,
"What is your problem, you disgusting child?"
and got to her phone to call the cops. I saw she had a small red spot on her arm. Unfortunately for her, my mom heard the commotion and ran out with her groceries. Her daughter was now crying, and there was a list of impatient drivers behind her. My mom and the security came out, guns a-blazing, not literally. The look on the woman's face was priceless. She drove away cursing us in French over and over again. My mom kissed the now shaken brother and was angry at me for slapping a lady. I explained the situation to my mom, and although she was upset, she was still happy I protected my brother. Wow, this is a crazy story that absolutely had a lot of zigs when I thought it was gonna zag. The fact that someone came up to this car and tried to reach in to move the car while there are children inside is absolutely baffling. You don't mess with other people's kids. And from the sounds of it, they had paid for this parking spot so that their mom could go shopping. So there really isn't a big deal. Like, I understand that this lady's pregnant, but by no means does that give you obligation to act insane. Crazy stuff. And I'm super happy for the kid in this story. They did the right thing by defending their brother and keeping this terrible person away from them. If I was in his shoes, I would have done the exact same thing.
A group of entitled parents make a huge scene at a restaurant, demanding that a young couple stop kissing in a booth close by. I work at an American-style restaurant, food like burgers, chicken wings, chicken tenders, etc. While we do have a small bar, it's more of a family-style type restaurant than a pub style of a restaurant. I've worked at this restaurant for about 6 years and have had my fair share of entitled customers. This weekend, I had one of the worst families come in. They were celebrating a birthday and the party size was 18, with both children and adults. The grandmother and grandfather were also there, as well as the parents of the kids. The kids in question were all either cousins or siblings, and the birthday kid had a few friends with him as well. This wasn't a catering event, and we had large parties like this all of the time. They were in the middle of one of the rooms, which is a loosely described word, and there were booths on multiple sides of them. In one of the booths near the window, there was this couple. They were teenagers, both 14 years old. I just finished student teaching, and I knew the kids. They had separate periods, but both kids seemed like good kids overall. The boy is a football player. He's very smart and gets good grades. I'm personally going into history education, and the teacher I was student teaching for is very much into the model of giving kids freedom on what they do. So most units end up in a project where they could do a slideshow, an essay, a video, research paper, etc., all about a topic in an era. For example, the Dust Bowl in the 30s, or the stock market crash in the 30s as well. She also loved more creative projects, like ones talking about how protest music was used in various eras. This boy always did his projects about sports and how they were affected by politics. He knows everything about the history of sports, especially American football. It's insane. The girl is a sweet girl. She's always at his games. She's very friendly, and while never showing intense interest in any topic, she's a smart kid overall and has a lot of potential. The boy was in his outfit. He had just finished practice. Him and his girlfriend weren't bothering anyone and were talking to each other privately. I ended up going over to talk to them for a little bit just because they wanted to talk to me, and I think the boy liked talking to me because I was a young male figure he could relate to. The family that was there there was very rude to begin with, and the little kids were acting up a bit, but they weren't being too bad. However, the parents of one of the kids saw the boy and the girl kissing in their booth, and they had an issue with it. The mother of the kids asked me to tell the kids to stop kissing, and when I told her I wouldn't do that, she got increasingly upset at me. I told them that there was no rules against kissing your loved one in a restaurant. The mother proceeds to insist it's inappropriate for her kids and nieces and nephews to see this, since there were toddlers there, and how the kids in the booth should
Keep to themselves.
When I again told her there was nothing I could do, she went over to the kids and tried to get them to stop. I was also getting dirty looks from all the other adults at the party as well. This woman storms up to them and tells them to stop kissing because there are kids around. They politely ask her to go away and she refuses. She then notices the boy had painted nails and went on about how disgusting it was. And at this point, the boy looked like he was going to punch her in the face. So we had multiple staff members come over to try to de-escalate the situation. We told her we would get the owner, and the other parents in the party started complaining about how we were being ridiculous and how they should sue the restaurant for indecent exposure. The owner comes over and tries to get her to calm down, but she is still going on with her
Think of the children rant.
She had to be brought into a separate part of the restaurant to be talked to. We waited until the kids were done eating to bring her back. After they left, we banned the parents from the restaurant for the foreseeable future. Finally, a story like this has a good ending. These parents got exactly what they deserved. There's nothing wrong with a couple kissing in a restaurant. From the sounds of it, it wasn't like they were doing anything gross or anything inappropriate. It seemed like an innocent kiss between two teenagers who loved each other. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, does this lady not kiss her husband or her spouse in any way in front of their kids? Like, it's okay to show affection, in my opinion, as long as it's not getting weird. And these kids were definitely not getting weird. My boyfriend repeatedly accuses me of cheating, even though I never did. I had been suspecting for a couple of months that my boyfriend, who's now my ex, of 3 years was cheating on me after he had been acting secretive with me. After lots of denial, he finally admitted to me that he had been sleeping with multiple women behind my back and had even been going on dates with them for the past couple of months. Of course, I was extremely devastated and we spoke about it. He said he'd been struggling with PTSD since he was incarcerated and said he felt alone in our relationship. I decided I would stay friends with him because I love him and that maybe with time we could try to work through it. Just when I thought things could get better, out of nowhere he starts to habitually accuse me of having had my own affair with another man, which is not true. At first he would bring it up on occasion in like a joking manner, but soon it became full-blown accusations. Mind you, he has no proof of this. He just keeps saying that he knows what I did, whatever that means. We have gone from trying to repair our relationship to him refusing to try to recommit to me and fix things because I won't admit that I cheated. At this point, I am in a lot of pain and just want what is best for me. I love him a lot and desperately want to fix things, but I can't convince him that I was faithful no matter what I did. I've let him look through my phone, I've shared my location when I'm away from him, nothing convinces him. I've told him that I can't be in his life if we can't work our relationship out, so if he can't trust me, we need to go no contact. At first, he agreed and even told me it was my choice to throw everything away, insinuating that he only cheated after I did, which is obviously a lie. Now for the past week, I've been trying to go no contact, but he is often trying to call and reach out to me. When I answer, he asks to go out to a movie with me or dinner and tells me how much he loves me and misses me, often reminiscing over our relationship and moments we've had together. It's hard because I miss him so bad and want to be with him, but I know he's seeing another woman. I just don't understand why he's doing this to me. If he really wanted to fix things, why would he make up this lie and try to gaslight me into believing it? Sometimes I feel like he doesn't even want me and that he's just doing this to emotionally torture me. What should I do? Sounds like she needs to let this guy go. He is clearly emotionally immature and is trying to push the guilt of him cheating on her onto her. She was faithful. She didn't do anything, but he definitely did. This is classic blame shifting. At this point, her best bet is just to block the guy and not contact him anymore. He clearly does not have her best interest in mind, and she can do a lot better. An entitled neighbor throws a party and then demands that her guests are able to use our bathroom in our own apartment. This just happened last night. Our neighbor had been quiet for a while jail, and my significant other and I thought maybe she had finally realized she couldn't control the whole building. One of her cars was parked in her spot, and the other was parked on the street behind my significant other's car. So we thought all was good. That is until yesterday. We are the bottom unit of an apartment, and we have a side door that opens out onto the shared lawn that everybody shares. I think the only time I use that door is to air out the place, or as a shortcut to hang out washing that I need drying out. So anyways, yesterday we were going out and about our day when we saw our entitled neighbor and a few other people setting up chairs and tables in the yard. No big deal since it's a shared space. A few minutes later, there's a knock at the door, and lo and behold, it's her. My significant other opened the door and did the usual greetings to anybody who would knock on our door. She told us she has a party and that we need to move our wooden planters off our patio because she needed our space for the barbecue, and that was absolutely not going to happen. Firstly, the patio is our space, not shared space, and secondly, they sit right next to the glass door, so I don't want some random person looking into my living room all night while they are cooking. My significant other reminded her that she doesn't own the building and that we wouldn't be moving our stuff just for her. After we said that, one of her friends went up to her and asked her what she was doing, stating that they already set up a barbecue in the yard. She huffed and puffed and walked off without saying anything to us, and we thought that was it. It was not. A few hours go by, and we ended up closing the curtains for privacy. And to be honest, whoever designed this building really didn't have privacy in mind when they installed giant glass windows that can look into your apartment. We can hear talking, laughing, and cooking, the usual sounds of a backyard party, when there's another knock at the door. I was cooking dinner, so my significant other answered it again. This time, it was one of her friends saying she had to use the bathroom, and that the entitled neighbor mentioned earlier told her to just knock on our door instead of walking upstairs. My significant other politely told her sorry, but she couldn't use ours, and she apologized for knocking and intruding. Not even 2 minutes later, there's a banging on the door, and by now my significant other is incredibly angry. He opened the door, and the entitled neighbor started laying into him about how dare he expect her guests to go all the way up the stairs, and that he needed to apologize to her and keep the door open for her guests. Mind you, this is our own private apartment. Now, my significant other is usually a calm guy, very easy to talk to and rational, but in that moment, he absolutely lost it. He told her to get lost and to stop bothering us, saying that she can't lay claim to everything she sees. Our bathroom wasn't hers to use. Her guests could use her bathroom, and if she knocked on our door again, that he would call the police for harassment. At this point, one of her friends came over and told the entitled neighbor she needed to leave us alone and to stop bugging us before apologizing and telling us to have a good night. We expected the party to be loud and to go on all night after that, but it actually wrapped up pretty early, about 1 o'clock in the morning. This morning when I got up, everything had been cleaned up from the yard, but our planters, the ones she wanted us to move, had been knocked over, conveniently enough. But the joke's on them because we hadn't planted anything in them anyways, and all that was in them was cat litter, so have fun with that. It's amazing to me that the entitled neighbor has any friends at all. Like, who acts like that? It's crazy that she really thought that this couple would just allow random strangers into their home to use their bathroom, and that they would just be okay with that. I mean, that's absolutely insane. Overall, I'm super happy that this couple stood their ground and told that entitled neighbor to get lost. My girlfriend of about 3 years constantly and consistently brings up things that I have done that have hurt her in the past, and I am not sure what to do. For context, my girlfriend and I were first together about 4 years ago for a year, then separated for over another year, and have now been together for over a year again. So one on, one off, now one on again. When we separated, she moved away and then back near me for a few months. The main things that I have done that have hurt her are as follows. This first one happened about 3 years ago. My girlfriend believes my friend, who is a female, consistently disrespected boundaries by treating me like I was her boyfriend, by doing things such as talking too much without involving her in the conversations, hugging me, or treating me differently than other people, and basically believing that this friend was treating me like I was her boyfriend. This female friend was my roommate's girlfriend, and I lived with them for years, so we had a close platonic relationship that never went beyond that. This occurred when we were first together for a year, and I have since moved out of that house. She will still randomly mention things like, "You let such and such disrespect your boundaries and didn't do anything about it," or
It would have been really nice if such and such respected our boundaries the first time we were together.
So I don't really talk to those friends anymore because I don't want it to bring up any bad feelings. This next issue happened about 7 months ago. My girlfriend and I planned to go to a music festival with a bunch of good friends that we don't get to see very much anymore. At this time, she did not live near me. She was halfway across the country, in fact. The above-mentioned couple is part of this group of about 7 of my closest friends. Several months prior to the festival date, I bought concert tickets and plane tickets, booked the rental house, and organized the trip. About a month prior to the trip, my girlfriend found an attractive job position near me and decided to move back into my area. Unfortunately, her timeline to move was the same weekend as the festival, and so she decided not to go. I told her I still wanted to go to the concert, but that I would fly to her to drive with her so she could do it another weekend. Unfortunately, she insisted that she had to do it that weekend as they expected her to start the following week. I asked her if they could push back her start date, but she did not entertain the idea. This was 7 months ago, and she still randomly says things like, "You shouldn't have let me drive here alone," or "I'm not sure I can rely on you because I needed you to drive here with me, but you prioritized the concert over me." In hindsight, I do wish I didn't go to the concert and went with her instead, which I have told her. The main reason I went were because we had this plan for many months. I had a lot of money invested into going. I don't get to see these friends anymore, and I haven't had a vacation in a very long time. These are just a few of the things that she constantly brings up. Does anyone have any ideas on how we would be able to resolve this stuff? Is it normal to take jabs for things that happened a while ago? It just feels like these things can come up and cause issues at any moment, and it does not feel good. Also, I've apologized for these things, and we have spent a good amount of time discussing them, but we seem at odds about them when we discuss them, and it turns into an argument. I think we should go to couples counseling, and we probably should have a while ago, but it seems like it might be expensive. What do I do? Okay, to answer this guy's question, first off, no, it is not normal to take jabs at things that have happened a while ago. If you've apologized and you've apologized again, and then you've apologized again and they're still bringing it up, then the fault is honestly on the other person, guy or girl. Continuously digging in the knife just for the sake of trying to prove a point or win an argument or whatever it may be is really toxic behavior and is a massive red flag. In this particular situation, it seems like the woman in this relationship is not mature enough to forgive someone for mistakes they've made in the past. And it's kind of weird that they're not more understanding about some of these. So overall, I wish this guy the best of luck in trying to save his relationship to some degree. My girlfriend snores so badly that I have to sleep in another room just to get some sleep. The title says it all. My girlfriend and I have been together for 6 months, but close friends for about 3 years. We sleep together regularly, but she has a very terrible snoring problem, to the point where I can't sleep or it wakes me up at night. I am a rather light sleeper with a sleep apnea machine. I've brought up her snoring many times, telling her it's really bad, and it's to the point where it's affecting my sleep altogether. I temporarily fixed the solution by sleeping on the couch or on a spare bed and setting an alarm before she wakes up to try and sneak into bed so it's like I've slept beside her. But she's caught on and thinks I just don't like sleeping beside her altogether. As someone who has sleep apnea and knows the wonder of having a CPAP machine, I've recommended trying a sleep study to her since the snoring is inconsistent and irregular, which is similar to sleep apnea, but she doesn't believe it because she is well rested and doesn't feel like it's necessary. Is there a better way to talk about this and resolve this with her? I do enjoy sleeping beside her and in my own bed, but it seems like this is a minor thing in her mind. It sounds like some good communication will go a long way. Snoring can happen to anybody, and if you're a light sleeper, it's probably going to take away from your ability to sleep. Hopefully they can work this out and find some kind of common solution, because nobody likes waking up feeling groggy and completely exhausted in the morning. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check out the links in the description if you want to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for yelling at a Karen after she almost ran me over in a Sonic drive-in? So this story takes place 1.5 years after the pandemic started. At the time, I was around 13 years old, and I was going to spend a few days at church camp having a good time with old friends. The drive was around 10 hours, and we all had to cram into a small van and a minivan. We stopped after a while and got out at a Sonic drive-in to go get some food. We all waited in line to use the ordering machine they had at the benches, because most of us went to use the ones in the car stalls. It was me and 2 of my friends ordering, and we all put our orders in and sat on the curb to wait. We sat and waited and got our food a little bit later, and we're having a good time. One of my friends went to order more food since he was still hungry, and I went with him since our third friend went went to use the restroom at a next door A&W. Me and him chatted while waiting on his food when out of nowhere, a white Nissan pulls more than halfway into the stall, almost hitting me and my friend in the process. The lady rolled down her window as me and my friend were standing up on the curb. The conversation went something like this. The Karen said,
"Move, you stupid little kids. I reserved this stall."
I then said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but my friend is waiting on his order here." I proceeded to point at the screen. The Karen wasn't having it, and she said,
"I don't care. Just move. I reserved this spot on the app and I'm in a hurry."
I tried to explain to her that my friend was waiting on his order, but she interrupted me and said,
"Shut up and move, you stupid little brats. Just move."
I was starting to get upset, but my friend tried to explain to her that he had an order still pending, but she called him a brat and lost it. I have a habit of getting really upset when people hurt my friends in any way because I consider them to be family. At this point, we had made a scene and I ended up screaming at her face, "Move it. I don't care if you reserve this spot, you almost hit me and my friend. You have no right to tell us to move." I ended up getting the attention of everyone in the stalls, the employees, and my church group, and I didn't feel embarrassed at all. I let her have it and put her in her place. And to be honest, it felt really good. She ended up going to another stall farther down after flipping me and my friend the bird, but I just sat back down with a smirk. Afterwards, the youth pastor talked to me one-on-one and asked what happened. I told him the situation that had just unfolded, and he was really understanding. He did get into me about saying cuss words, but besides that, he let me go without punishment or anything. Some other people in our group asked me what happened, and I told them the story, and my friend even pitched in. Looking back on it, it was pretty funny, but I feel like I could have been more patient and got my pastor to help me out. Was I the jerk? No, you were not the jerk. This lady almost ran you over. Honestly, you reacted much better than I would have. You don't treat kids like that? Like, obviously, there's an easy explanation for this, but the Karen just wasn't having it. So no, you are not the jerk. You didn't do anything wrong. This lady was upping the ante and treating children like garbage. She honestly got what was coming to her. My family has never respected me and intervened in the wedding that I was paying for and backed their friend instead of me. And I've decided that I have had enough and that they are out of my life. I married my wife January of this year. We've been pushing it forward since 2020 due to the pandemic, but I've been thinking about this since 2018 when she was living abroad on a scholarship grant. Of course, we're not on good terms all of the time, but we love each other and support each other as much as possible. Sadly, I can't say the same for my family. I've always been distant with my parents since they always do everything they can to drag me down. Although they paid a lot for my education since I was little, I never felt receiving any kind of support from them. Never received advice, compliments, gestures of appreciation, not even hugs. I've always been the independent son, saving all my money I earned, never received a single penny of allowance, and finding ways to make extra cash. Somehow, slowly, the idea that I was kinda alone in the world got deep into my mind. My older brother, on the other hand, was treated quite differently. He was spoiled by my mother and grew up a very, very entitled human. And I must add that soon he learned how to play around with our parents and use them in the exact way he wanted. I don't blame him for using them. They are horrible people. To finish background, I have to detail my parents too. They are both narcissist, self-centered, and everything else available to highlight how they care only about themselves. My father cares only about money and thinks it can buy happiness for him and everyone around him. He's also an arrogant hothead and will turn aggressive if anyone confronts him or if anything doesn't go his way. My mother is manipulative and evil and will do anything by any means necessary to get people to do what she wants. She also has my brother as her favorite. I could say I was my father's favorite, but since I started to get bad grades on some subjects, it changed completely. As you've already noticed, I'm not comfortable near my relatives. So in January this year, I've decided to finally marry my wife and get moved into my own place. I felt I couldn't be happier than that. Prior to that, we decided to throw a celebrating party only a few months after. Since pandemic was striking hard here, we opted for a small wedding, only with the closest people. The party is going to happen this month. Since we started doing the guest list, hell raised in my family. My father would always have someone he forgot to be added to the list. list, a sister he didn't talk to for a long time, a friend he trashes in the back, a brother he simply forgot. The guest list, which was already at 50 people and above, was already close to 70 people. The most important thing about this party was this: both parents' sides are helping with a substantial amount of money, but we asked for that in place of their wedding gifts. On top of that, I am personally paying for this party, and let's just say it's more than half. For someone in his 30s working as a software developer, I was pretty lucky to be able to pull that one off, but I did, and everything for the wedding is already paid, and with some cash still left in the account to cover any emergencies. I started trying to reason with my father about how I couldn't invite some people, since increasing the guest list would mean paying extra for basically everything only to accommodate those extra people. His only comment was about how he didn't know things were so expensive, and it also didn't stop him from trying to put more people in. These last days, the lady we hired to deal with all the party's logistics of handling guests, aligning with contractors, setting up time schedules, etc., started calling all guests to check if they would come and who exactly they are also bringing along. We need this to finish paying the buffet for any person above the initial amount, and also for the decorator to arrange everything in proper amounts. One of the guests, my parents' friends, didn't take the COVID vaccine, which we requested as mandatory since the very beginning. And this goes back to sending invites themselves. The man in question, a doctor, gave us a whatever reason he couldn't be vaccinated, and also why it was not needed. To be honest, he could be right, but nobody bought it. We've heard a few times that this couple is an anti-vax couple, so I talked to my wife and we decided to enforce the vaccine rule on them and tell them that they could not come. I was willing to accept a cotton swab test, but my wife had already canceled with two of her aunts, and I felt it was unfair to allow these two to come in. Cue my family's entitledness. My mother started messaging me using the sad and disappointed mom mask to guilt trip me into allowing them to come. She went even further to tell my brother and made him send me a voice recording telling me to be reasonable about this. My father, of course, was angry, only quoting his friend's message he received and told me to solve this problem fast. I know the vaccine rule could be considered harsh with the way we applied it, but people are going to travel 5+ hours into our city, so they're a risk factor thinking about spreading COVID around. Also, even if the test is negative, how can I ensure an anti-vax person won't catch it during the trip and spread it around the party if we can't guarantee that even for anyone fully vaccinated and even wearing a mask? They argued about all public events getting back to normal around here, and they didn't account for me and my wife having to hug everyone and nobody wearing masks since everyone will be drinking and eating for hours. You could think that they deserve to have an input about this, since they're paying for the party too. Well, we asked for any amount that they were willing to give in place of their wedding gift. This means that their money is a gift to us. But the most ironic part of it all is that my parents are the richest part of this wedding, but they paid the lowest amount. I insisted to pay for at least half of everything, so the final word on everything is me and my wife's, and there's no discussion about it. But they didn't even make an effort to pay more than my wife's parents, who took money from their retirement funds just to chip in. So added to the entitlement, self-centeredness, and everything else you can point out, they're also incredibly cheap. But none of all of that hurt me the most. I got deeply hurt when my mother, during her attempts to guilt trip me, said I never yield to anyone's wishes and always take things too seriously. Now, how do you, dear reader, think was my life when living with 3 entitled, selfish, petty people? 50 points if you answered, never had anything your way, or always had to give up your wishes for the sake of others. I always talk to my psychologist about how I always felt like I was playing the role of an extra in my own life, how I always felt I was living for serving other people. I've always neglected my own happiness so I could help other people feel happier. And the worst part is that until today, I can't switch it off, and I blame my parents for doing this damage. So when my mother said that I am the unyielding one, a movie of my life went through my mind, accounting for all events I remembered when they forced their wishes over mine. New Year's, I couldn't be with my wife because they are family. They're more important. Trips back to my place, I wasn't allowed to make because I wouldn't dare defy her will. Mockery she's made about me and who I am, which turned into heavy confidence and self-esteem issues, and the list goes on and on. Sadly, this is not the end of the story. I still have to endure the wedding party, which I was honest to my wife that I didn't really want anymore. She even got near to canceling everything too, telling how my family is invasive and don't respect any kind of personal boundaries. We're even planning to doing our vows before the party ceremony, so that in the vows we can vent about all these things that got us upset. But I've already told her I'm getting away from my family in a definitive manner. I am even looking for a lawyer to discuss the possibility to change my last name with the purpose of not having any legal bonds with them anymore. My wife advised me that this would cause a massive fight terrified in my family, but I'm done with them. And if I have to issue a restraining order to keep them away, I will. I am done with trying to deal with them and still being seen as the black sheep of the family. I consider my mom's message a statement of how I am less than a family member to them because they cared more about their friends than me. They always did, and I'm done with it. This is a rough one because this is really, really sad. On the happiest day of your life, your parents and family you would think would be on your side in helping plan the best day of your life. But instead, they went back to their same selfish tactics of manipulation and coercion just to try and get their way. I don't blame this individual for wanting to cut them off, and I really hope if they do that they find peace in their life. An entitled Karen loses her mind after I tell her she needs to wear a mask in order to come into our store. I used to work as a cashier at a bread bakery during my last 2 years of high school, so I started right around when COVID hit the planet. Over time, medical masks became mandatory in Germany, so simple fabric ones wouldn't do it in public stores. As always, there are many people reluctant or simply too dense to know how to wear a mask correctly. You cover your mouth and your nose. Every time a customer came in with no mask or wearing one under their nose, we'd kindly remind them to put one on. There were always mixed reactions ranging from, "Oh, sorry, my bad," to eye-rolling and exacerbated sighs. Actual rude comments were pretty sparse, luckily. Well, this particular encounter seemed to have made up for the lack of snide remarks before. The rush hour in the afternoon has just started to settle down again as this lady struts into the room, wallet in one hand, water bottle in the other. Not only was she wearing the mask under her nose, but it was also a cloth and not a medical one. She already gave me a weird vibe since the store was empty except for her, me, and my coworkers, most of them being on a break in the back room. I let the cloth mask slide and just opted for reminding her to please put the mask over her nose. That seemed to have been the wrong thing to say to the Karen as she essentially exploded on me. She said,
"No, I will not. I am exempt from wearing one by my doctor. I wouldn't even have to wear one at all."
Due to data protection, I can ask for proof, but she is not obligated to show me. But I thought it could never hurt to ask, right? Wrong. After this, she says,
"I don't have to show you anything, you little brat. I come in here every week. You should know me by now. What is wrong with you? Did you hit your head or something?"
I learned from my coworker that normally Karens only come in at some point during the middle of the week and not on a Saturday. And I only worked weekend shifts, so I had never met her before. I say, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I wasn't aware of your doctor's note." It's not like she had a magical glowing and pointed sign above her head, and I am not psychic, so I can't read minds. Please someone tell me, how am I supposed to know about any of this? That's when the insult started. The Karen then explodes and says,
"Well, you should. You young people are all the same. Stupid and uneducated, and the world has gone wrong because of you idiots. You don't deserve this job. There must be something actually wrong with you. You know nothing. You should be taken away so that you can be properly put in your place and for you to learn respect, since you idiot children don't seem to have any."
She started waving her hands around while screaming at me. She threw her wallet on the counter so that she could point her spindly fingers in my face. She goes on to say,
"Why do you even bother to work here if you don't have people skills? You don't deserve it. Do everyone a favor and go away."
As she said that, her arm lunged backwards, as if she was about to throw her water bottle at me, and I flinched away.
She says, "Yeah, that's right. You cower, you stupid child. I don't want to see you anymore. Go away and get me a different server."
With that, I turned around to go to the break room to promptly have a nosebleed, while my coworker went outside to throw her out. Please remember that the world doesn't revolve around you. Not everyone knows who you are, and people can't read your minds. Oh man, this Karen is absolutely out of line. Who goes into a store of any kind and starts acting like that? I know we've all seen someone act like that, but it's just crazy to think that someone can be this entitled. Good on the manager for coming out and saying that they've got to go, because nobody deserves to be treated like that. An entitled Karen takes my seat on an airplane and refuses to move, demanding that I pay her to move. This happened back in 2018. I was a 23-year-old man at the time who usually visited his parents and siblings for Christmas and New Year's, because that's the only time I could see them. So I am in the airport waiting to board my flight as I see a woman getting angry because her kids were tired and she wanted to get on the plane. I thought nothing of it and was hoping that she wouldn't sit near me. As I was approaching my seat, I see one mother and two kids in one of my seat. I tell the mother that that's my seat, and she is visibly upset at my statement. She snaps back and starts swearing at me. To avoid having a fight on this plane, I grab one of the flight attendants and show her my boarding pass. At that point, the flight attendant asks her to move from my seat politely. This ended up really pissing off the Karen. She raised her voice and started screaming,
I paid for it. I'm not moving.
The flight attendant, still being polite, asked to see the boarding pass to check the seats. The entitled Karen pulls out 2 tickets for the seats next to mine. The flight attendant, slightly less kind, says, ma'am, these are only 2 boarding passes. Where's the 3rd one? The mother, thinking she's smart, says,
I must have dropped it, the 3rd one, so I don't know, I just can't find it. I can't give it to you.
So this causes me to butt into the conversation and say that I have the boarding pass for that seat because it's my seat. The look on her face, you would have thought I had slapped one of her kids, because she then shouts at me that
This is my boarding pass, give it back.
I'm confused why she's so delusional at this point, because it's obviously my ticket since I bought it. This argument went back and forth over and over again. The flight attendant ended up saying that I clearly paid for the seat as it had my name on the boarding pass. She ended up arguing for several more minutes after this before she stopped and smiled and said,
well, if you want me to move so bad, how about you pay to upgrade me and my children to first class?
I responded by saying, Miss, I only have a business class seat because I do trips like this once a year, so I tend to be comfortable during my flight, and I don't have funds for 3 first class tickets. The flight attendant then says to the Karen, either you or one of your children will have to move, or else we will have to remove you from the flight. Then, without holding back, she screeches that I am somehow a danger to her and that I'm gonna hurt her children if I sit next to her. Me and the flight attendant are physically taken back after hearing this. After that, I stopped trying to be nice and I started shouting at her that she needs to get out of my seat and never make those claims against me ever again. The flight attendant tries to calm me down and calls for security. In the end, the Karen and her kid were escorted off the flight and I got the entire row to myself. Flying on a plane is already cramped enough, and the last thing you need is somebody trying to take your seat, especially if it's a business class seat where there's just a little bit more wiggle room. I mean, how insensitive can people be? I'm glad that guy got his seat back, and I'm especially glad that that lady and her kids got kicked off the flight. An entitled mother yells at my friend because she couldn't win an escape room. I used to work at an escape room, and on Thursday evening, just after Christmas holiday, I had a late shift with 2 colleagues, Jess and Darling. Jess is a 17-year-old girl, Darling is a 16-year-old male, and rather small and thin for his age. We've known each other before we started working together, and I've even helped them get the job. Part of my job is to know how to handle customers, particularly difficult ones. Despite this though, me and my colleagues weren't exactly confrontational. Darling struggled with social anxiety and depression, and I am non-confrontational and struggle with mild autism, and Jess was very, very shy. We weren't exactly the most threatening people, but opposite to Darling, I am quite large and burly. I'm in no way a bodybuilder, quite the opposite in fact, and many adults tower over me. But if I suck in my gut properly, I can come off as quite muscular. Anyway, we were working together and it was quite an easy night. I had problems with my leg from a surgery I had years ago, so I stayed in the control room most of the evening, occasionally guiding a few people into the bigger rooms. This group comes in quite late in the evening, and she has booked one of our more thrilling rooms. It has creepy background noises, takes place in a prison, and most of the room is dark. In fact, one of the portions is completely pitch black. Usually this would be fine if it wasn't for the fact that she had 2 kids ages 8 and 13. Now, this wasn't my first run-in with this lady, so I had an unnerving feeling of what I was getting into. Seeing this lady and her kids in the hallway, I asked, to be sure, which room they booked, and she said in a snarky tone, as an employee at this establishment, you should know exactly which room we booked at what time. We have been waiting for 15 minutes. When you book a room, we ask you to arrive 15 minutes early as to avoid people coming in late. I say, I apologize, I just wanted to make sure, as you booked the prison break, but the room isn't fit for kids, and it's advertised as an adult room. She says,
well, you should have been specific. I know for a fact that my babies can handle it. They are big, strong boys, aren't they?
And she pinched her son's cheeks as she said that. I said, as long as you're sure, because we are not accountable for any emotional discomfort you or your kids may come upon in that room. Don't say I didn't warn you. After that encounter, my coworker Darling took them into the room. During the explanation, Darling noticed physical discomfort on the faces of the kids. They were nervous, and the lights flickering as the room progressed didn't help. Eventually, we heard the 8-year-old boy cry through the walls. They were thin walls, mind you. And the mother loudly telling them to man up. Once their time was up and they couldn't get out, she berated Darling about the room and how it was too scary and way too hard, and how we should have warned them and such. Darling was getting insecure and panicked and was about to go into a full-blown panic attack. My other coworker wasn't feeling too comfortable about the situation either, so I stepped up and took over. I said, Darling, go back to the office with Jess. As she goes back, I look at this lady and I say, ma'am, please refrain from yelling at my colleagues, as that is not appropriate here. She starts shouting, well, you should have warned
warned us that it was going to be scary and impossible.
I responded, ma'am, if you cannot have a mature conversation about this, and in fact will continue to scream, I must ask you to leave the premises at once.
She ends up saying, don't you dare say that. I want to speak to someone in charge.
I end up saying, listen, our manager isn't in right now, so as far as I'm concerned, I'm in charge. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time to calm down and refrain from screaming at me. This ticked her off even more. She was absolutely enraged.
She proceeds to slap me in the face and say, you young man, do not get to talk to me like that. Now I want to speak to the manager because you're going to lose your job.
I stop her and say, listen, lady, you do not have to physically assault me because you couldn't finish a room. I warned you from the start that this was a scary room. Now I must once more ask you to leave before I call someone to make you leave by force. She looked like she wanted to slap me again, but didn't. She eventually backed down and left in a huff, spouting about how my boss was going to hear about this. I didn't know who I was messing with, and I was going to lose my job, allegedly. Joke's on her, I worked there for almost a year after that whole situation. This entire situation is absolutely craziness. This lady slaps this guy over an escape room that she couldn't get through, let alone bring her kids through at that. How this kind of person hasn't been banned already and prevented from coming into this establishment is beyond me. The original poster even says that they recognized them when they came into the escape room. I mean, how do you let someone in like that who's gonna act like that? Overall, if it was me, the second that lady would have hit me, I would have immediately called the police. Nobody should be physically assaulted over just trying to do your job. My girlfriend spends all of her time playing video games with another guy, and I never get to spend any time with her. I'm thinking about leaving my girlfriend, and it's purely over jealousy, so I'm feeling very conflicted. My girlfriend and I both play video games. I'm more into single-player strategy games, and she plays all these online MMO type games. Last year, she started university and joined their Gamers League, which is like a club for gamers. She met a guy who plays a lot of the same games as her, and they've been playing online almost daily. They voice chat constantly, and she's probably playing 80% of the time I'm home. Her school hours are the same as my work hours, but when we get home, she goes right to our gaming room and slaps on the headset. This man gets more one-on-one time with my girlfriend than me. I've brought this up to her, and she said I was just being jealous and unreasonable. The dude is apparently gross, and she just enjoys playing video games with him. The thing is, I get legitimately lonely, and I feel like I'm completely alone and that she's not even there. Her headphones block out all of her attention towards me. I watch TV and movies alone, cook alone, I do everything alone. Sometimes I lay in bed and just want to cuddle, and all I can hear is her giggling and laughing in the other room, and it just makes me sad. I love my girlfriend, but I'm not going to fight for attention from some other guy, even if he's innocent, which to be honest, it doesn't really totally feel like it. I want to try one last ditch effort though, I guess. If you were me, how would you approach this with her? I am legit just lonely and sad and unfulfilled in this relationship, which is sad because we're both moved in with each other and we would go on dates. She'd come over and I'd make elaborate meals and all this stuff that we just don't do anymore because of her gaming. What do I do? He needs to talk to her about this. I mean, if this is enough of an issue where he feels like he's distant from his girlfriend, he needs to communicate that clearly. I really think that they can make this work. This seems like such a silly thing in hindsight, and it really should be an easy fix. He just needs to say, hey, you're spending more time with this guy online that you don't even know than your own boyfriend who's in the home looking at you who just wants to be around you. There's also the option where he could start gaming with her in the games that she's playing. He could just kind of insert himself between that situation and say, hey, I want a game too. That might be a possible solution, but overall, they just need to talk and work this out. An entitled parent tried to force me into caring for her child for the foreseeable future. Back in the late 2000s, I was hired by my aunt to take care of my cousin since she was about a year old to help her, as she was then a single mother with a very career-driven mind. Her parents got divorced because the mother worked too much. It just so happens that she likes her job and would even work from home. Her father was a layabout, barely could keep a job if he ever bothered finding one, but he was her high school sweetheart, so she didn't really care because she enjoyed having him around in some kind of eye candy fashion, at least at first, because 5 years of laying about did cause him to inflate in every possible direction. They started to grow even further apart because my aunt would work and her husband would not do any work, including child rearing or cleaning, but thought that my aunt would stop working that hard so he could just be a lazy person. Not really a good role model, to be honest. When my aunt got divorced, she still had to work, but she had her baby to take care of. I was about 12, 13 when I first got offered quite the generous pay, double the minimum wage back in the days, so about $16 an hour at the time, to help take care of my baby cousin while her mother worked in the other room, plus the promise that my college and university would be paid for by my aunt. So, being the little opportunist I was, I thought, great. Now, I was too young to believe I would need to get all this in writing, so I am perfectly aware now that I should never trust anyone's word that easily because we are related. I was arguably mature for my age, but most of my work was simply to change the baby and feed her from 4 until 10, so my aunt could work without being interrupted, and take a nap so she could then take care of the baby. I had my own room set up at her place, and often would simply spend my time studying or playing video games when my cousin was not calling for care. Keep in mind, this was not unusual in my family. We are tightly knit. We learned soon after that the father had skipped town. To this day, he hasn't come back, not even once. I was kept in the dark for a year or two, but I was told later. I was my cousin's dedicated babysitter/nanny most of her life. When I was done with high school, my aunt even offered me more money, so I would take care of her longer, and when she started school, I helped her with her homework. Then things got a bit weird. The older she got, the less available my aunt became for her events. So I started filling in for her. Recitals? I went with her. Parent-teacher conferences? I went. I was about 20-something by that point. I would pick her up from her play dates, no questions asked. But then my aunt went back against her word. I wanted to go to college, get my degree or something. She said, no, you have to be available to take care of your cousin. I explained to her that I would still be able to help out after school, but I would be just a bit busier, and my schedule might change. She completely blew up and teared me a new one. She screamed at me in ways I never expected her to, especially since we had such a good relationship for the past 7 years. She told me I was selfish, told me that my cousin relied on me and that I should be grateful for the opportunity of helping her raise her child. I tried to reason with her, but she got even angrier. And then she slapped me across the face and told me she wouldn't pay me one time for the college or university, that I would come to take care of her child and that's that, because that's what family does. I pretended to agree because I was simply terrified of her at that point and knew enough stories not to try and reason with her, and just left for the evening, just imagining having those big green eyes bloodshot from rage glaring down at you with the heaviest breathing you could imagine. This is what I was opposed to. I went to my mother, then to my father, then told them the story. I was about 20 already, but never has anybody raised their hand on me, at least in my family. My father and mother had been divorced, but when they heard the story, in a united front that would only be accompanied by the Avengers theme song, they went to my aunt. According to my mom, my aunt thought that since I did not go to college right away, she believed that in some twisted perception of the world, I would take over as my cousin's paternal figure and stick around to raise her kid with her. This was beyond the comprehension of me, my father, or my mother. She was told that she was not allowed to see me anymore and that she could start considering childcare services from now on. Now, I love my cousin. I can safely say that my affection for her is somewhat akin to one of a parental figure, as I saw her grow from a baby to an adorable child that she is today. But in absolutely no way was I ever picturing myself being their parent, or that I would have to take care of her until she was old enough to move out. After that, my aunt had the gall to make a phone call and make me speak to my cousin. My cousin, being around 7 years old then, was crying on the phone and asking me if it was true that I didn't want to see her anymore and that I hated her. I asked her if her mom was around. She said yes. I told her that she was family and that no, I did not hate her. I told her that I wanted to go to school like her so I could become smarter, and told her she can call her aunt, who's my mom, whenever she misses me, and I would make time to see her at my mother's place. This apparently comforted her and enraged her mother because she picked up the phone and screamed at me some more. I hung up. Today my cousin is a bit older. We don't see each other as much anymore, but she still calls me every week or so. I don't speak to her mother anymore, but she apparently changed quite a lot after the events. She went to therapy after the events and actually ended up reducing her work hours to take care of her child. She is growing up healthy and loved. She sometimes calls me dad whenever I sound patronizing on the phone or in person. Even more often, learning the whole story from me, my mother and father, and my aunt own up to it all. No matter the past, she is today one of the dearest people to my heart, and she is always welcome around me, my friends, or the ladies in my life, because she truly is a sweetheart. My aunt, however, never called me to apologize or to make amends. She never made good on her word, so I never believed that she ever truly accepted the fact that I was not wrong. I do not attend events where I might run into her, and I spend Christmas with my friends instead of spending it with my family these days anyway. My family is not as tightly knit as it used to be, and if I ever agree to take care of her child, I demand payment in advance. Yeah, if I was this guy, I would never work for that lady ever again. I mean, what a terrible parent. They legitimately wanted to push their kid off on somebody else to literally raise them, all at the expense of this person not being able to have, I don't know, a future of some kind. They wanted them to stay out of university just to raise their kid. That's a whole nother level of abuse that I can't even possibly comprehend. I feel sorry that this story went down the way it was, and I genuinely wish this person the best of luck moving forward. Am I the jerk for letting my kids think that their mom had passed away so that we could get free breakfast? I will first say that this did not happen today. It happened about 8 years ago, but it still comes up every time I take my kids somewhere. My wife had a big work project from home, and I had some unused leave days, so I took the kids to see my family by the beach for the first time on my own. I have 3 kids, 1 7 and 2 5-year-olds. We got to the hotel after a 4-hour drive, and the clerk checking us in asked where the kid's mom was. I immediately thought I was going to get some BS about how you couldn't be alone with 3 kids in a hotel. As I was gearing up to let loose, one of my 5-year-olds said, "Mommy is not with us. It is our first trip to our grandma's without her." I didn't think anything of it. They had been mildly upset Mom wasn't along the whole time, so I just said to the clerk, "Yes, this is our first trip without her." He immediately excuses himself and goes in the back. I am annoyed. I just want to check in and get the kids settled for the next day. He comes back with the manager and they both look upset. I am getting madder and madder at this point. Then the manager says, "Sir, we are very sorry for your loss and know this must be a hard trip. We'd like to offer you free breakfast for the duration of your stay. I know it's not much, but we want to help." Now it clicks. They think she's passed away. Not working, probably enjoying the alone time in the house. So of course I graciously say yes. 4 people, 4 days, that's a nice chunk of change, which I graciously accept. Then one of the twins asks, "What did you lose, Daddy?" The clerk helpfully says, "Your mommy. I am so sorry for all of you." The kids were confused. I tried to blow it off, but the 7-year-old goes, "That means someone passed away." And the twins lose their minds. We get whisked off to our room, and I have to call my wife to prove she's alive. She's not amused. Eventually, everyone settles down, and I have to call the desk to tell them that I think there's been a misunderstanding, and that I can't accept the free breakfast for me and my family. I didn't tell them why. I just said that I know we wouldn't use them, as we were seeing family the whole time. I avoided the clerk and the manager to the best I could the whole time we were there. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago when I took my oldest on a quick trip to see my mom, and as we were leaving, my wife says, "Hey, don't tell anyone I'm unalive." This is a hilariously tragic story. I mean, how traumatizing must that have been for those kids to think, "Oh no, mom has passed away." To answer the question, yeah, the dad's a jerk in this one. I don't get to say that very often because most times these situations are pretty straightforward. But yeah, the dad's a jerk. Sorry, man. You can't just allude that your wife is no longer with you just to get free breakfast. But thankfully, it's turned into like a family joke and people can have a good time about it. So hopefully the kids haven't been too scarred because nobody wants to go on vacation and come back traumatized. Today I messed up by inviting my crush to spend the night at my house. I'm currently visiting my parents who live in a relatively small town. The plan was to have a wholesome weekend with my family and eventually leave with brand new memories to cherish. I basically sabotaged that plan the moment I realized my high school crush, a girl I will reference as Sarah, lives 2 hours away. Back in school, she was always in relationships with other people, and I never got the chance to express my feelings. I've moved on from her for the most part, but as a 22-year-old guy, high school doesn't feel like ancient history yet, and those feelings I had for Sarah never really died. It just went into hibernation. Cut to me summoning the courage to call Sarah. Her phone number was still the same. When she answered, I first had to explain who I was. Not gonna lie, jogging her memory took some time, but I didn't take it personally. I was socially awkward in high school. She eventually remembered me when I mentioned an incident where I had to stand in front of the class during life sciences and demonstrate how to properly open a condom wrapper. It was a cringy thing to remember me for, but whatever. It was smooth sailing from that moment onwards. Towards the end of our call, I decided to throw it out there that if she happened to be close to town, then she's more than welcome to come and visit. Sarah revealed that she was in town that moment, visiting friends. Without wasting time, I invited Sarah for dinner so she could meet my parents and continue catching up with me. She accepted my invitation and came over last night. As soon as we locked eyes, I had to send my brain an urgent telepathic message telling it to calm down. We're not 17 anymore. Sarah was still drop dead gorgeous gorgeous, and not to mention a fantastic guest. My parents loved her and so did I. My dad, the accidental wingman, suggested that Sarah spend the night since none of us realized how late it was until it was too late. I passionately supported my old man's suggestion and invited Sarah to stay in the guest house with me. I made sure to emphasize that she could sleep in my bed while I crashed on the couch. Sarah was hesitant, but she eventually expressed her appreciation and decided to sleep over. I woke up on the couch at 2 a.m. to the sound of Sarah talking to someone in her bedroom. I think she underestimated how thin the walls were because I could hear every word. I heard no one else, so she obviously was on the phone. If I had to presume the context of their conversation, I would say the person on the phone was one of Sarah's friends who also went to school with her, because Sarah was describing me to this friend based on who I was in high school. It was clear that the friend was struggling to remember me, much like how Sarah was struggling when the two of us spoke on the phone earlier. Sarah found it funny and provided more and more details. To my surprise, Sarah remembered more about me than I thought. She referred to me as her high school stalker. I mean, what? I've never stalked anyone in my life. Sarah also mentioned an incident on Valentine's Day when someone in class was leaving random love letters on her desk with no name. Even though the culprit never came clean, Sarah told her friend on the phone that she always suspected it was me. Just for the record, I'm not the person who wrote those letters. However, according to Sarah's tell-all phone call, I was the guy in class who apparently made her feel like someone was watching her all the time. She made a joke about locking the bathroom door just in case, since I was a creep. If that wasn't traumatizing enough, I had to listen to Sarah gossip about my parents, my dad specifically. She had nothing but nice things to say about him. One might even say a little too nice. She made it clear to her friend that she found my dad attractive and would be more than willing to spend more time with him, if you know what I mean. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep after that. This morning, I went for an early run while everyone was asleep. I left Sarah a note saying she can leave whenever she wants to, but I'm going to be gone for a while. Overall, though, I regret inviting her over, and I'll never do that again. This guy invited a girl over from school he barely knew, who he had a massive crush on, only to have her talk absolute garbage about her. That's a really terrible situation. The fact that she even agreed to sleep over at all, and let alone come over to his house, is very surprising to me. I wouldn't have done that, but she went ahead and did it. It's just a shame that she was so toxic about it. I mean, they invited her over and showed her some hospitality and allowed her a place to stay. The least you could do is be a gracious guest. Or, if anything, go out to your car to have that kind of conversation. Overall, at least this guy knows her true colors and he can stay away from here on out. My fiance has been cheating on me with a married friend of mine. I'll call the friend Jeff and his wife Maria. I'll call my fiance Anne. Jeff, Maria, and Anne are childhood friends. Just for the context, my fiance is on vacation and she has been staying in Europe with her family. Anne's family also invited Jeff's family since their parents are close friends. I didn't mind her taking some time off and enjoying her vacation. She has told me that Jeff is like a brother to her. I couldn't join her personally because of the workload I currently have. It has been 3 weeks since she left. We've only been texting and calling a few times. She sent me pictures and videos and I was happy that she is enjoying the vacation. Yesterday, Maria came to my house drunk and sobbing. She was talking about unaliving herself. I got confused and scared for her well-being, and she broke the news that Jeff and Anne have been having an affair. She was suspicious of Jeff for months, but she only found out a month ago. I asked why she didn't tell me, and she told me that she was only suspicious and had no evidence, and she wasn't sure if she should have told me as it could hurt my relationship. We discussed everything last night till the morning. She bought an Android phone to download all of the Snapchat and Instagram data off of Jeff. Anne was sending him very suggestive messages, sending him dirty pictures, if you know what I mean. And they're planned to meet up soon as he wanted to spend some quality time with her. This text that I saw from him was dated February 5th, and there are so many more. The last text I saw was from the 3rd of April. They were planning to meet in some restaurant and go for a movie, and now I was thinking this was their date. I am heartbroken. I haven't really cried in years, but this made me. I was also angry. I wanted to call her and talk unthinkable things. Maria suggested we take revenge on them right then. I refused. I know she was angry too. I told her you'd be a cheater like them if you go down that path. She wanted to get wasted and pass out. I asked her to get some rest and we'll discuss things tomorrow. I let her stay in the night as she was too drunk to leave. We shared our social media IDs and she told me to make a different one so no one can keep tabs on that. And today we are meeting for lunch to discuss our partners. I can't process it. I can't believe that she would do that. She's the nicest and sweetest person and she would betray me and lie to me. My question is whether I should confront them or call them or wait to come and see her, because I cannot be patient for a few more weeks. What should I do?
Regardless of what this original poster decides to do, they need to cut ties with their soon-to-be spouse. They do not need this in their lives. They've obviously seen true colors. This is something that they absolutely need to run away from. I would say send screenshots of all the conversations that you've seen, say, hey, I've got proof and that we're done, and then move on. It's easier said than done, to be honest, but at this point, what else is there really to do? The fact of the matter is that this relationship is definitely over, and there's no point in trying to hang on to it.
My parents robbed me of my childhood and teenage years. I'm 20 years old. Growing up, I never got to spend my summer mornings outside playing with my friends. I had to study, stay up to date with extracurriculars, and write pages to improve my handwriting, to be allowed an hour outside in the evening. While all my friends were having fun, I was inside crying with a pencil in my hand. All my extracurriculars were picked by my father, and they were all activities he found interesting. I was never once asked what I actually wanted to do. I never got to do sleepovers except with my cousin, just because my parents didn't want me to. I was to constantly study and get good grades, and if I slacked off even just for a bit, I was beaten with belts, shoes, and household objects. My father even spit in my drink once and made me drink it to humiliate me for disobeying him. Books were my only escape, so I would often get engrossed in them, but my father didn't even let me have this one thing. He humiliated me for having this insignificant hobby. He hid my books at one point and threw some of them away. Then came my teenage years, and it only worsened from there. The loneliness I was feeling in my childhood intensified. I was rarely allowed to go out with my friends, and on the occasion that I was, I'd been bombarded with millions of calls and messages, so I couldn't even enjoy it. Dating was also off limits because my parents didn't want me to date. My cell phone was occasionally checked, and I was slapped for using curse words. I was 16 years old when all of this was happening, not a child. I wasn't allowed to go to any parties, and I never went to prom. Hobbies that I actually wanted to cultivate only caused more insulting from my family and ridicule to the point that I lost interest in them completely. I always wanted to be a writer, but now I can barely motivate myself to type a single word. I've lost all my passion. Now I'm 20 years old, on the verge of moving out soon, in less than a year. I've lost 20 years of my life. That's 20 years I'll never get back. 20 years I'll never get to experience and live again. My childhood and teenage years are gone, and it's never coming back. And when I bring this up to my mother, she says that I'm holding the past against them and harboring a grudge. The funny thing is, they're the same people now that they were when they did those awful things to me. They haven't changed in the slightest. My father to this day maintains that his beatings were justified because they were for my own good. My mother defends his actions by saying he meant no harm, but I see no good that came out of it, and I am still hurting from it. I lost 20 years of my life to my parents, who were essentially my jailers. A quarter of my life is gone. What did I gain from all this except a lifelong of baggage? And Mom, if these were supposed to be the best days of my life, I really don't want to see what's in store for me ahead. I hope whoever wrote this story finds the happiness and the security that they deserve in life. It's one thing to have strict parents who expect a lot out of you, but it's another thing to just have absolutely abusive parents who clearly tortured this young lady all throughout her childhood and teenage years. Good for her for moving out and moving on, and it's such a shame that she lost her childhood and teenage years, but I genuinely hope she finds happiness and success moving forward. My entitled aunt invites herself to our family vacation, despite nobody wanting her there. A little background. Growing up, my aunt has always been a bit entitled, and believed that my sister and I were beneath her, and not fit to play with her children. My mother is also entitled to an extent, and neither really liked my husband when we first started dating. I was 19 and he was 26. Our first Christmas together we spent at my grandparents' house, and it was always the rule that the older children had to watch the younger children until they became an adult. Well, my husband made the comment that he thought my aunt was a terrible person because she threw a fit when he refused to go downstairs and watch the other children as we were adults and didn't have any kids of our own. This didn't go over well with my aunt or my mother and caused them to think and comment badly about him for 5 years. So in late 2020, my aunt started to hang around our house every week with my mother, saying that we treated her better than her own children. In 2020, our kids were seniors in high school and about to graduate, and I wanted to do something that we haven't had time or money to do, as I was always working 2 jobs before they go off to college. I started planning a family vacation to Disney and Universal Florida as a graduation present. At this time, my husband and I were both working 2 jobs so that we could save up enough money to support the boys while they were in college. That way they can just focus on their schoolwork. Now, at first, we did not tell anyone what we were planning for the reason coming up. However, it did get leaked to my aunt and mother what we were planning, and at first my mother was okay with it being just my children, my husband and myself going. My aunt, however, decided that she wanted a vacation too, and that she would just come with us on our vacation since we were already going. My mother soon thought that if my aunt was going, that it would be okay if she went as well. My husband and I were not okay with this, but having learned from the past, we knew they would make our lives a living hell if we didn't give in. So we agreed, and they knew that they had to pay for themselves. We were in the planning stages and decided that since our boys were so tall, it would be better if we drove to Florida instead of paying $4,000 just for all of us to fly, as we didn't have that kind of money. We were looking to rent an SUV as it was going to cost $2,000 for 2 weeks, and we had decided that after Disney, we were going to drive around to Arizona to tour our college campus and then circle back home. While we were discussing this, my aunt decided that we will use her car. My husband and I didn't like this idea as it has a lot of wear and tear on that vehicle, but she insisted and we caved again. It was only the 4 of us driving down as my mom and aunt were going to fly, and I would have to pick them up at the airport since it was an hour away from our hotel. While planning the trip, I asked everyone if there was anything specific they wanted to do so I could plan for it, as we had to make park reservations for each day of our stay since it was during COVID. I decided on which park we were going to based on everybody's wishes. All through this planning, my aunt says she is fine with everything and thanks me for taking all of this on. The trip starts and we drive down, and I drop the kids and my husband off at Disney Springs while I go get my mom and aunt from the airport. First, their plane was an hour late and no one told me. They knew their flight was delayed before they boarded and they could have texted me, but they didn't. After I pick them up, we head to the hotel to check in and drop them off at their room. I go and pick up my family so we can get them settled in the hotels as well. My mom has mobility issues, so she rented a scooter for the week, and my aunt said that if she had any problems walking the parks, she could rent on there. I do want to note that I have had a bad back and usually cannot walk or stand for long periods of time, but I was working on my stamina for this trip so that I wouldn't need a scooter as well, since the car was not big enough to hold all of us plus 2 or 3 scooters. Also, they decided that we would drive to the parks instead of using Disney transportation since it was faster and easier for them. So the next day we had planned to go to Universal for the day, and as we were staying on Disney property, we had to drive. Keep in mind that there were now 6 of us plus a scooter in this car. The first hiccup happened when we were looking for the Diagon Alley entrance so we could get our wands for the boys to use around the park. None of us had been to Universal except for my aunt, so we were a little lost, and I was looking on the app trying to figure out where to go. My aunt then starts saying that I don't know what I'm doing and asks, "Do you know where you're going?" I reply that as this is the first time I've ever been here, no, I don't know where we are or how to get where we're going. She huffs and puffs and starts talking bad about me and my kids. I make the comment that since she has been here before, she should take the lead and we will follow. She says no, and that I am better at figuring this stuff out. Eventually, we find the entrance to Diagon Alley, and we get the wands and start wandering around. She's a little huffy about the fact that I stood up to her, but I ignore it and just try to have fun. There were a few rides we wanted to go on, but they couldn't, so we split up after lunch. My husband and I went one way, our kids went off in another direction, and my mom and aunt go somewhere else. While we were waiting in line for a ride, my mother calls me and says that my aunt was trying to get a scooter, but as the park was all out of scooters, she's going to take the car and go back to the hotel. I then told her that I have the keys. She said she brought the spare keys and that she will come back for us. I go into full panic mode, as my aunt is known to ignore calls and texts and will fall asleep and not wake up until the next morning if she is worn out. I tell her that she can get an Uber or a taxi to the hotel, as there's no guarantee she will return for us, and it would be a lot more expensive for us to get a ride back to the hotel than it would be for her. She then states, "It's my car," to which I reply that as we traded cars and she has mine, that it is actually my car until I get mine back, and that she can't just leave us stranded here. If it was in the Disney park, we would have transportation options, and it wouldn't have been a big deal. As we were gearing up for a war over the car, the customer service desk called my aunt and said that they had
had a scooter available. She was okay with that, and the whole thing with the car was dropped. I thought this was the end of it. I mean, I was angry, but I wanted to enjoy our vacation. However, this was just the beginning. The next day, we are in the Disney parks, and I sent the boys off to have fun, since it looked like they were going to be stuck with my mother and my aunt for the duration of the vacation, and I wanted them to have fun on this trip. The morning was okay, but the afternoon wore on. My aunt kept making little snide remarks about how I was controlling everything and deciding where we went, etc. I told her that she is more than welcome to go her own way, as I only decided on which park we were going to. And so this was her attitude the whole week we were in Disney. She would constantly pick at me or badmouth me to my family and even to strangers as we passed. And every time I snapped back, it just seemed to add more fuel to her attitude. She wanted to go to a sit-down restaurant at the Sci-Fi Diner, as that is where we were able to get reservations. It was cool as the tables and booths are styled to look like cars and picnic tables, so that it seems like you're in a drive-in. Now, as we were a party of 6, it is a little difficult to seat us, and when we were sat, it was at a picnic-style table. Because it was not a car style, my aunt and mother threw a fit. They caused such a scene that the manager ended up caving in and finding us a car table. I was so embarrassed that I pulled the manager and waitress aside and apologized for their rude behavior. At the end of dinner, as we were about to walk out, I discovered that neither my mom nor my aunt left a tip. The waitress was super nice and did a great job dealing with those two. I went back and added more money to the tip I left, as she was wonderful. So this was how the week ended up being with them, and every day after the first day, my aunt would ask when we would take them back to her car, as she didn't want to drive again because it smelled bad. She did know from the very beginning that we would be gone a week longer than them due to our other plans. It is our last day in Disney, and I had made a reservation for a character dinner that my aunt requested. But in these COVID times, everything is socially distant, and the characters no longer come up to your table. They were there, and they did interact with each guest so they could get pictures and such. I had explained this to both my mom and my aunt and asked if they were okay with that. They said they were. However, they complained the whole time about how they didn't get to hug Mickey or Pluto. And again, they failed to leave a tip for the server, who was bending over backwards to make sure we had enough of everything. But since they couldn't hug the characters, it was the worst meal they ever had. I was fed up with them at this point, and after we were done eating and paying, and after I had left the biggest tip I had ever given, the boys, my husband, and I leave to go ride a couple of rides before we go back to the hotel. There was one ride that my mom wanted to go on with us, but she didn't communicate that to me, and so we didn't know and went on the ride without her. We met up with them when we got off the ride, and she was livid. We said we were willing to go on again, as there was no line and we liked it, but she said she just wanted to go back to the hotel. The next day, I drove them to the airport in silence and dropped them off. I cannot tell you how relieved I was to see them go. I later found out that my aunt had left my mother in the airport to get to the gate on her own in a wheelchair with her luggage. My aunt had the tickets on her phone, so I don't know how my mother would have been able to board the plane if she hadn't caught up to her, thanks to a traveling mother with kids. After they left, we continued our trip to Arizona. Our vacation lightened up, and my husband and I started having fun. And we thought that would be the end of it until we got home. Again, we were so wrong. Every day, about 2 to 3 times a day, my aunt would text my husband. She would not contact me at all, and ask when we were giving her car back, and he would tell her the same thing we told her from the beginning. When we got to the border of Colorado and Omaha, we did start to get a bit worried that she might report her car stolen, which would have cost me my job. Thankfully, she didn't go that far. After we got home, we detailed the car and filled the gas tank up so that it was much cleaner than it was when she gave it to us, and she wouldn't have anything to complain about. The next morning, we took her car back and picked up mine. When we arrived, my uncle came out to the house and just stood there with his arm crossed and didn't say a word to me. Just stared at me like he thought I was going to try and get past him or do something to my aunt. I knew then that she had been telling everyone in the family how I mistreated her. I don't know what my uncle thought I was going to do, but I guess I didn't do what he expected because he stood there with a surprised look on his face. I just wanted to leave and go home, so all I did was hand her the keys and she hands my husband my keys, and then we get into our car. The minute I get into my car, I was livid. It is trashed and only has a quarter of a tank of gas. I gave it to her clean with a full tank of gas, mind you. That night, my aunt sent a text to my husband thanking him for cleaning the car and had to admit that it was cleaner than it was when she gave it to us. As we were leaving my aunt's house, my husband turned to me and said, "Yeah, I was right 20 years ago. This lady is a terrible person. To this day, that side of my family does not talk to me, and I am okay with that. My mother is still super upset at how my aunt and uncle treated me and has not voluntarily talked to me if she can help it. In the future, we have decided that if we tell the family what we are doing, we are going to tell everyone that it will be just the four of us and no one else will be welcome. This was the first major family vacation we had since the boys were born, and my aunt and mother ruined it for us. At least my kids had fun, since I wouldn't let them be dragged down by their drama. Oh man, these people are way nicer than I would have been. I would have cut them off from the get-go. I cannot believe they endured that trip with these two people. That must have been an absolute nightmare, and as it was described, oh my goodness. I cannot imagine going through that. Kudos to them for having way more patience than I would have. Am I the jerk for trying to set boundaries with my mother-in-law before she splits up me and my partner? My partner and I have been together for 7 years. My mother-in-law has always had an issue with overstepping boundaries. She was a single mom to my partner who is an only child, and she has never really let go of the fact that her child is now with someone else. Even when he has tried to push back, she just eases off and then creeps back in inch by inch. When we first started seeing each other, I used to think it was odd but sweet that his mom still made his lunches for work and cooked his tea if she was over at his house. She also did his laundry. He said she never taught him how to do his own washing or to use an iron, so I ended up having to teach him instead. His mom still does these things. After I moved in, I realized his mom was over every day. She would come over whether we were home or not, as she had a key. She would tidy around the house and go into every room. She would move my things and take my dirty laundry. I would tell her not to, and she would acknowledge me and then just do it anyways. Over the years, this has escalated. I have told her countless times to stop, but she says she's trying to be helpful and we're so busy. I'm not a confrontational person, so I say I appreciate the sentiment, but I'd rather she just didn't. What I really want to say is that I'm 35 and I don't appreciate anyone interfering with my things in my house that I paid for. The situation isn't helped by the fact that she looks after our toddler here once or twice a week when we are both at work. During those times, she will meddle with laundry, move things around in our bedroom, go into rooms in the house that she has absolutely no need to go into. She will move things around in my wardrobe and drawers, including my underwear. She has even taken items belonging to my child that I have bagged up for charity and hidden them in the attic, and then reassembled them and brought them back into the house. We have security cameras, and I have caught her coming into our house when we're out and staying for hours, meddling with things until somebody comes home. I have had discussions with her about this and everything else, but she just dismisses them and walks away. So I usually end up texting her asking her to stop doing these things, and she will read but never reply. Recently, we found out we were expecting again following 2 miscarriages. It's early days, so we are keeping things very quiet. My family doesn't know about the miscarriages. I've been keeping my prenatal vitamins and a spare pregnancy test in my underwear drawer under some things, so it won't be seen. This morning, I opened my drawer to find she's been rummaging in it yesterday, as the test and vitamins have been disturbed. I want to scream and cry and tell her to never come back. I feel like I have no privacy in my own home. The pressure is making me ill and causing a huge rift between me and my partner. Unfortunately, I can't tell her to get out and never come back, as she has an incredible bond with my daughter, and my partner would never abandon his mom, as she has nobody else. We also cannot afford wraparound childcare outside of nursery hours without her, so she has to have a key. I've decided I'm going to see her face to face today and try and have that discussion about boundaries and overstepping, and I want it to be the last time we need to have that conversation. I'm personally very afraid of confrontation. How do I deliver a statement which is strong but not inflammatory? Honestly, I think maybe if the daughter was put at the grandmother's house, this might solve some problems. Also, it sounds like you need to change some locks. If your husband is legitimately this weird and doesn't want to keep his mother out of his house, then you need to have a serious conversation with him. This is obviously bothering you, and he needs to step up and do what's right. And the right thing to do would be to support you. There's no reason for you to feel like you can't hide anything in your house. So in my opinion, drop your daughter off at her house and change your locks. And the fact that this has been going on for 7 years is about 6 years and 9 months too long for me personally. I think you just gotta put your foot down for both your husband as well as your mother-in-law and tell them both that this is how it's gonna be. My ex-boyfriend is using photos of me online to catfish strangers. I broke up with an abusive partner last summer and it was very messy. He did some really weird, messed up stuff. The police were even involved. He refused to leave me alone until he ended up in jail for a bit. I believe he's still on probation and legally he's not allowed to contact me. One of the many weird things he did was use my photos online and go to different social media or dating apps just to try and get people he can hook up with. I mean, he would say these really random, disgusting, creepy things to these random people online. I don't use dating apps, and Reddit is my only social media profile. I only found out because someone I know came across his profile. Apparently, he was doing it when we were together as well. He admitted to it and stopped, as far as I know. A different friend let me know they saw someone using photos of me again, like this week. I assume it's got to be my ex again. Who else would it be? Obviously, I can't report the profile, but presumably, there's nothing to stop him from doing it again. I don't want to contact him. Legally, he's not meant to have any contact with me, but I suppose this doesn't really count. I really want to forget this guy exists and could massively do without this weird, creepy, random stuff. It's probably worth mentioning that I never sent him any photos of myself undressed or allowed him to take such pictures. For various reasons, that's just something I really don't want to do. The photos my friends saw were regular, fully clothed pictures of me. However, another of the weird things he did after I broke up with him was sending me some photos and video clips he took without me knowing, so he has access to at least some photos like that. I should also be clear that I don't actually know this is him. I have no proof other than he's done it before, and who else would it possibly be? Has anyone had to deal with this kind of situation? Is there anything I can do? I'm not sure how seriously the police would take it, given the lack of proof and the fact that no one's immediately in danger, though the fact he's already on probation probably helps, I guess. What do I do? Honestly, I would report this to the police. You gotta get something on record that this guy is absolutely violating your privacy and using your image as some ways to hook up with people, even if it's just being a catfish situation. There are ways to contact social media platforms where they can probably pull like IP addresses or their data or their location and probably figure out exactly what's going on. There's nothing scarier than someone impersonating you online, and I really hope this lady finds the solutions she needs so that she can move on with her life and get away from this weirdo. Today I messed up by telling my mom I got a piercing and me and my dad kept it a secret for 5 years. She's not happy. I grew up in a very strict household. My mother was always the one to say I couldn't go out after a certain time. I had to be home by a certain time. I couldn't have tattoos and piercings. She has also tracked my location since I was about 16 and continues to do so now, but that's another story. Just to give some background. When I was 17, I expressed to my mother that I wanted a piercing. We had several conversations where every point I made was smacked down with a, "No, you're not allowed one." This continued until I was 19 and I moved away from home for university. At this point, I decided to get the piercing, but I didn't tell my mother. I knew she would react very badly and I feared confrontation and being shouted at / yelled at. I never argued with her because quite frankly, she did and does scare me. I did, however, tell my dad. He had piercings when he was younger and he was far more laid back about them and tattoos in general. He had no problem with me getting it. Fast forward to today. I've always had trouble opening up to my mother about my issues, but today she actually helped me to talk about something I'm struggling with. We were having a really good bonding session and talking about being rebellious teenagers and how she rebelled but I didn't. And then I decided to tell her about the piercing 5 years later. Surprisingly, at first she was okay with it. I put the piercing in to show her and she didn't like it but said it's none of her business now that I'm almost 25. Then she asked if my dad knew. This is where I messed up. I was so relieved that she was being so good about it. I said yes without thinking. She blew up. She is furious that my dad didn't tell her and kept it from her all this time. According to her, her ex-husband lied to her when they were together. And she said her and my father didn't keep secrets from each other. She brought up the fact that when I came out to her, she told my father the same night and talked to him about it, saying they talk about everything and she can't believe he would keep something like this from her. I also told her not to tell my father, which she did anyway, if that's relevant. I've never seen her react like this to anything. So now I'm left absolutely devastated that I've caused this and that I've potentially caused irreversible damage to their marriage and relationship, all because I was too scared to tell her about my piercing when I was younger. What do I do? First off, this is really not your fault for not telling them. You obviously were afraid of talking to your mom. And second off, this is a crazy overreaction. It'd be different if he was hiding some deep, dark secret that actually affects their marriage. It seems like the mom in this situation is just reaching for anything she can to be offended. Like maybe there's something else going on between her and her husband that's not being told about in this story, but for the mom to be upset that the dad didn't tell her about their daughter getting a piercing is kind of weird to me. I wouldn't feel bad about this. You didn't do anything wrong. You're living your life, and obviously you didn't tell her because you were afraid she was going to freak out. And if anything, that speaks volumes about the mom and not about you. My fiance is doing business with my high school bully, and I don't know what to do about it. My wife, her best friend, and I went to high school together, but I ran in a very different social circle. They played sports and were decently well known and popular. I was really into art and computers. I was really chubby and I had an awkward haircut. We all went to a rather large high school, so it was more that I knew about them rather than knowing them personally. Becca, my wife, and Daria, her best friend, have been best friends since they were really young. They both moved into the same neighborhood in preschool and their parents are very close. In high school, there was this guy named Chris who would regularly bully me. There was a name that Chris and his friends called me based on a thing that happened my sophomore year. It was essentially a trap that Chris and his friends had set up so that I would be embarrassed and they could pretend I had done it to myself. I feel like I'm already doing a bad job hiding my identity, so let's just say that my name was Stinky. I hated it. They called me this all the time and made me the butt of many of their jokes. Chris was very popular and was friends with Becca and Daria in high school. Chris was good looking, wealthy, and he knew it. He walked around like he was untouchable. Insert all of the wealthy, athletic, good looking stereotypes that you want here. They pretty much all rang true with him. I hated him and hated any time that I had to be around him. I know that a lot of people face some really violent bullying, so I don't want to make it sound like I was physically tortured, but I did feel like I was relentlessly harassed. I was very thankful and excited to get out of my hometown and away from those people when I went to college. I don't know if it was growing up or growing into myself, the ability to reset my identity, or just getting away from bullies, but I really found myself in college. I'm still a bit of a nerd and artistic, but I grew into my body. I started making friends and realized that I had something to offer to the world. I rapidly became a lot more confident and comfortable socially. Becca and I ended up going to the same college a few hours away, but she didn't have a car. I offered her a ride home for Thanksgiving break, and it became a habit of riding together for breaks and chatting about life and school. We started to become friends, and our friend group started to combine. In sophomore year, our talks became deeper and more personal. I realized I was into her on the way home for Christmas and asked her on a date over break. We've now been together almost 7 years, engaged for the last year. We have a strong relationship. We communicate well, go on regular dates and trips, and have supported each other through numerous ups and downs. We have had our fights over the years and even did some counseling together for about a year. We've found those times to be challenging, but helpful in the long run. I love this woman and am excited to get married and spend our lives together. Becca and her best friend Daria reconnected after college and now own a business together that plans events and helps connect people and businesses to local food, drinks, and experiences. Their business really took off in the year before COVID, and they've been slowly but steadily growing back as things have been opening up. They have started to enter into a number of exclusive contracts with event spaces and restaurants. In a market where things can turn ugly quickly, these deals are super important to them as they provide a lot of security for their company. Becca came home about 2 months ago, really excited about a new brewery exploring an exclusive deal. About a week later, the brewery signed and there was a dinner to celebrate. Becca asked if I wanted to come and meet the team from the brewery. She told me that I might have met the owner before, but I guess I didn't think to ask who it was because I didn't know who it was going into the dinner. If you're still with me, you can probably guess who the brewery owner is. I was sitting at the table with Becca, waiting for the rest of the group to arrive, when Chris came through the door, walked up to the table, greeted Becca, and then turned to me and said, "Hi, Stinky." I was immediately confused and angry. She knew that I knew Chris, and she knew that he had harassed me throughout high school. She didn't mention at any point prior that he was the owner of the brewery and that she was working closely with him. I got through dinner, but on my way home, when I asked why she didn't tell me, she blew it off as though it was water under the bridge, that I had changed and I should understand that Chris has changed too. I was still upset, but tried to let bygones be bygones. Over the next couple of weeks, it was clear that Daria and Chris were becoming romantically involved with each other. Becca and I usually spend 2 to 3 nights a week with Daria, whether going out or simply watching TV at our house or at hers. We often joke that we're a trio, if you know what I mean, but to be clear, that is not the case, and what we have is strictly platonic. Over the last month or so, Chris started showing up to nights out
out and even came over one night to Daria's house when we were hanging out and watching TV. I've tried to be open to a new Chris, but he seems like he's the same overly macho, trying too hard to be the alpha jerk he was all those years ago. I tried to bring it up to Becca that the casual relationship between Daria and Chris is probably not good for their business. And while Becca agreed, she felt like she couldn't tell her friend to not date or sleep with somebody. Last week, Becca invited me along to an industry event. I got there to unfortunately find Chris is there as well. I try to be friendly and nice. We get a table for the four of us and have some drinks and food. At one point, the girls leave to network with a couple of potential clients. Out of nowhere, Chris starts talking about how this event might be a good place for him and Daria to find a woman to have a threesome with. Caught completely off guard, I ask him what he's talking about, and he says that him and Daria want to have another trio and that I should know all about that. I was super confused and asked what he was talking about, and he proceeds to tell me that him, Daria, and Becca had a trio relationship in high school, if you know what I mean, and that he figured that I was also having that type of a relationship with the two girls as well. I felt blindsided and didn't know what to say. When we got home, Becca already knew I was upset about something and asked me what was wrong. I told her about what Chris had said, and she tried to deny it at first, but then told me that it was partially true. What Becca told me was that Daria and Chris were in a relationship for a bit at the end of senior year and right before college. Chris and Daria spent a few weeks talking with her about having a trio, if you know what I mean, but she was on the fence. At a party when everyone was tipsy, it was brought up again and she went and she did exactly what you're thinking. All of this was brand new news to me. In addition to not really coming into myself until college, I was a late bloomer in terms of relationships. Becca was my first everything. I knew and wasn't upset that she had had intimate relations before us, but we had never gone into when or who it was with. Becca keeps saying that I never asked and she never lied about all of this, but especially with doing business with Chris, it feels like lying by omission to me. I'm struggling with all of this. Chris did his best to make my life awful in high school and now is back. Almost every time I spent time with him, he seems to be belittling me, making fun of me. He even told Becca in front of me that she could do better than me and was dating down. It seems like this trio thing that's going on between Becca, Daria, and Chris is just one more thing he can hold over me. He's a snake and he always says the worst things to me when Becca and Daria are just out of earshot. We've been arguing about this for about a week now. I asked Becca to cut all contact off with him last night. She told me I was being unreasonable. He's with her best friend and they all do business together. She keeps asking me why I can't move on and accept that Chris is a different person. I keep telling her he's the same and I can't for the life of me understand why she keeps defending him. Unfortunately, in my anger and frustration during the fight, I said something about her secretly wanting to be with Chris and Daria again, and that changed the fight and caused her to say that she will not continue to talk about it if I'm going to be unreasonable. We haven't talked since. I slept in our guest room last night. I guess what I'm asking is, where do we even go from here? How can I fix this? This isn't just a break up with her situation. I love Becca and we've built a life together. We have a strong, supportive relationship. We are planning a wedding and a future. How do we move past this? It sounds like to me, this is a lot less to do with the guy in this situation and a whole lot more to do with Becca. If she actually cared about her future husband, she would do what she can to make sure that this situation is in both of their best interests. It seems like this guy absolutely cannot get along with Chris because Chris is absolutely toxic. He's a snake. And it seems like she is taking business over her personal relationship. Chris was absolutely toxic and horrible to this guy in high school. And the fact that Becca is not acknowledging that and trying to claim that this guy is somehow different is really disturbing to me. If she really can't see why this is a problem for this guy, then maybe she's the one with the problem. The guy can't fix this situation, but Becca can. Becca needs to cut this guy off. This is a very clear line in the sand, especially if this guy is saying nasty stuff to this guy behind Daria and Becca's back. That's my take on it, but leave a comment down below. What would you do in this situation? Am I the jerk for feeling insecure and having doubts while dating a touring musician? I started dating my boyfriend in early 2021. He's a professional musician and has played and recorded with a number of relatively well-known bands. He's mainly a session musician, though he's also released some amazing solo stuff, and has been playing with a particularly successful band for the past few years. He's honestly amazing, and this is the healthiest and happiest relationship I've ever been in. We've met and are close with each other's families. We're very in love, and we communicate very well on all things, except this one concern I've had. He goes on tour a lot, usually internationally, and typically for 3 to 5 weeks at a time. At the start of the relationship, he wasn't really touring because of COVID, but as things opened up, he started to play more shows. I've been to a few of his shows and seen what it's like after a concert. Lots of partying backstage and being surrounded by tons of really hot, really cool people. Festivals are even crazier. Tons of partying and hundreds of groupies backstage. I'm generally a confident person, and I'm confident he loves me and thinks I'm wonderful. He conveys this frequently. He's also never given me a reason not to trust him. When he's on tour, we keep in touch and he texts me at least once a day. I know people who want to cheat on their partner will cheat regardless, and the opposite should be true, but I still keep finding myself getting worried that the party environment, the frequent drinking, the occasional substance use, and the prevalence of groupies will eventually lead to temptation over time and drive him to resent me or even cheat eventually, especially as his career continues to grow and his lifestyle outpaces mine. I'm personally in a good job that I love, but I'll never make that kind of money. He also works closely with so many creative musicians, and a part of me worries he'll eventually decide he wants to be with someone who understands him on that level as well. I'm not a creative person, and I can't share that part with him. He's given me no reason at all to doubt him, and so far this relationship has been absolutely perfect. He's so caring and thoughtful, and I can't imagine anyone better to be with. I love that he's a musician, and it's amazing to see him flourish creatively. I wouldn't want him to have any other job because this is such a big part of who he is. But a part of me has been growing anxious over all of the above that I've just explained. I also want kids in the future, and I'm not getting any younger, so I worry about putting years into a relationship only to fall flat on my face in a few years' time and have to start all over. I know one glaring question staring me in the face is the fact that, well, why have I not spoken with him about any of this? And the answer is I don't want to dump my insecurities on him or make him feel as though I'm anything but supportive of his work and his touring. I know these sorts of insecurities can erode a relationship, and I also don't want him calling on tour because he feels like he has to or because he's worried about my insecurities. I don't want to put that kind of pressure on him or taint the relationship with these concerns. How can I make this relationship work? Am I crazy to think things could work out in the long term? Are my fears unreasonable? What do I do? I personally think it's fantastic that these two are still in a relationship together. To be in the music industry means to be on the road constantly, and it sounds like this guy is in the thick of it. I think it's absolutely okay to talk about your feelings and talk about your concerns. It very well could be a thing that brings you both closer together. I think it's fair to bring up this kind of stuff as a potential problem, but at the end of the day, I think you're really just gonna have to put a lot of trust into this boyfriend. He's obviously been loyal and faithful to you, and he's not done anything to make it seem like he's not gonna be that coming home. And although the unknown is scary, I think with proper communication, they can both walk this together and still come out the other side as a loving couple. I ended up having to babysit a 4-year-old I never met on a 5.5-hour long flight, all because her parents were neglectful. This happened about 10 years ago. Back then, I had to travel for work every so often. The travel was always last minute, which meant I typically ended up in a middle seat. This particular flight was from Miami, Florida to Seattle, Washington. It's a long flight at about 5.5 hours, but I was used to traveling a lot, so I always had things to keep me occupied. When I boarded the plane, I was seated towards the very back. In the window seat was an older woman. No one was in the aisle seat or in the other seats across the row. I got settled in and waited to see who would sit next to me on the aisle seat. After most of the plane was full, a family of 4 made their way down the aisle and set up next to me. It was a mom, a dad, a 4-year-old girl, and a boy, probably around 2 or 3. To my surprise, the parent and the boy sat the seats across and let the 4-year-old sit next to me. This seemed like an odd arrangement to me, as my parents always boxed us in so we wouldn't bother other people, but I wasn't worried because the parents were 2 feet away. The plane eventually taxied and we took off. The young girl was very polite. We talked a little bit about how old she was and if she had ever flown before. It was around this time that I asked her what she was going to do on the flight, since it was a long one. She just shrugged and said, "I don't know." I then looked over to her parents, hoping they would pull out a book or something. Sadly, both parents and the little boy were fast asleep. As this was a business trip, I had planned to catch up on some work during the flight. We didn't have Wi-Fi on planes much back then, but I had things to write up and I had an offline copy of some emails I wanted to dig through. However, the little girl kept talking and asking if I had anything to do. Now, at this point, I could have put on some headphones and just ignored the little kid for the remainder of the flight. I know others would do the same. Actually, when the woman next to me heard the little girl had nothing to do, she wished me good luck and opened a book, proceeding to ignore me for the rest of the flight, which honestly I do not blame her for. I know others would have ignored the kid too, but it wasn't her fault her parents didn't bother to have anything for her to do. I felt bad, so I started coming up with little things to keep her busy. I asked a flight attendant for a pen, explaining how the kid had nothing to do for the flight. They were kind enough to bring me a few pens. I then grabbed the airsick bags and showed the little girl how they could be puppets. I then asked her to create some characters out of these puppets so we could use them. That occupied her for a little bit. We then played with the puppets for a little bit. We looked through the onboard magazine together and talked some. Around this time, the movie was about to be shown. Back then, we didn't have screens in the back of every seat. It was just one movie on one of those tiny TVs that hung over the overhead bins, and you use your headphones to listen. You could also buy headphones for about $1. I didn't care what the movie was, but I paid $1 for the headphones and told the kid to enjoy. I'm pretty sure the movie was PG-13, but I didn't care. She watched the movie and I was able to get some work done. Around 3.5 hours into the flight, they served a meal to everyone. This is when the parents finally woke up. Meanwhile, the TV that had shown the movie was now showing some TV shows, and the kid kept watching. Eventually, we landed safe and sound in Seattle. Since we were in the back of the plane, we had to wait while everyone got off the plane. The people seated in front of me turned around and said to me, "Your daughter was so well behaved on the flight. You raised her right." I smiled and said, "She was really well behaved, but she isn't my daughter. I've never met her before this flight. Her parents were over there." The people gave me a funny look and said, "But we heard you were doing games with her." "I know," I said. "She didn't have anything to do." I kind of shrugged, indicating I knew how odd the situation was. Eventually, we were able to leave. The parents never thanked me. Instead, they simply asked the little girl if they had a good flight, and then they left. This is really odd to me because I can't imagine this happening 10 years ago. I've been on flights before and I can never imagine any parent willingly allowing their child to sit with an adult they've never met before, let alone let that adult play games with them. It sounds like to me that these parents that just fell asleep were not good parents and were in fact very neglectful. Good on the original poster for deciding to take the lead and entertain this child for 5.5 hours. But overall, this is a really unfair situation and things certainly could have gone bad. Today I messed up by ruining my sister's marriage over a prank. So this happened last night, but it's been less than 24 hours, so I think it still counts. Either way, I played a prank on my sister who was a new mom. My niece is 2 months old and I came by to help out around the house some. I ended up hanging out all day and long after her husband came home from work. The baby was sleeping in a back room, so my sister asked me to check on her. After confirming that my niece was deeply asleep, I saw a nearby baby doll and got a wicked idea. I wrapped it up in blankets and took it back with me, rocking it the whole way. When I got back, my brother-in-law was walking around the room in my direction. My sister was sitting on the couch. We locked eyes and I said, "She's awake," and then I dropped the doll. I was expecting my brother-in-law to look comical in a scramble to catch her, but nope. He instinctively shot out his foot like he was trying to catch a hacky sack and kicked the doll across the living room and into the windows that overlooked the backyard. My sister screamed and rushed to the doll while I laughed hysterically, and my brother-in-law just stood there stunned. She cradled the doll, now realizing that it was a joke, but still she sobbed for a long time. She was so furious that she wouldn't speak to either of us. When she was able to talk, she fled to the back room and spent the night cuddling her daughter. I spent the rest of the night consoling her husband, who also thought it was pretty funny once the shock wore off. He was worried about my sister, but she wasn't letting either of us in, so there wasn't anything we could do about that. She did message me this morning saying that she is going to stay at our mom's until she cools down, but that I'm still not to go to her house for any reason. So yeah, she's still really upset at me for doing the prank in the first place, and now she doesn't think my brother-in-law has it in him to be a good father. Yeah, this is a really bad situation to be in. When it comes to people's kids, you don't mess with them. You can mess with just about anything else in a person's life besides their kids. And personally, I don't think the father in this situation is a bad father. I think he was just thinking on instincts, and I don't think he was intentionally meaning to punch
punt the baby across the room like it's a football. I think it's all just a misunderstanding, and the person who did this in the story 100% needs to apologize to his sister and do whatever she asks. You don't screw with other people's kids. It's not okay. I was caught by my boyfriend talking to another man at a bar who bought me a drink. After a hockey game, my boyfriend and I planned to walk to a casino to gamble. There was some commotion on the short walk from the game to the casino, so I started to have my second panic attack ever. So I went to the bathroom and told my boyfriend while he went to gamble. I was trying to keep my panic under wraps, so I didn't tell my boyfriend the reason. I stayed in the bathroom and cried a tear or two from being overwhelmed and being a little too panicked. Then I cleaned myself up and walked out. I don't know why I didn't just walk back to him, but I walked to a bar where an empty seat was. After a few minutes of not being served, this random man next to me called the bartender to ask for a drink for me. I initially politely declined and reached to grab my own card, but I had left it with my boyfriend so I wouldn't lose it. I was getting up to run and grab it from him while he was gambling. Then the man at the bar put his card down to pay for it. I drank the drink and we talked for a while. He was telling me about his girlfriend, and I told him how I had to get back to my boyfriend who was gambling at the moment. According to my boyfriend, who was watching for quite a while, I was at the bar chatting for 40 minutes, and that the guy who had got me the drink had also touched my arm and leg. Then he took this hat off that I was wearing and put it on himself, which is when my boyfriend came in and snatched the hat off and put it back on me. He yelled at the guy, grabbed me, and walked off. My boyfriend was very upset, and while he was standing at the casino exit, he stood there and yelled at me. The security came up and told us to take it outside. We got an Uber to his house, and I felt so bad I ended up sleeping in the guest room, and he was gone in the morning to go to the gym. I'm just reaching out here to get some perspective on how I should move forward because I'm lost and my boyfriend is heartbroken. What should I do? I mean, honestly, let's look at this from the boyfriend's perspective. His girlfriend runs off, goes to the bathroom supposedly, and then he ends up finding her sitting at a bar talking to another man for an extended period of time. And this other man is starting to get a little too touchy-feely with her, and she doesn't do anything about it. From his perspective, it probably looks like some pretty obvious flirting was happening, which is just not fair. He was expecting to have a fun night out with his girlfriend to go gambling or whatever it is. It literally could have been anything, but the principle is still the same. You were flirting with another guy at a bar, and you didn't do anything to make it clear that no, I do not want to be around you. So yeah, he has every right to be upset, and you need to try and do everything you can to try and repair this relationship if you want it to work. My sister hides behind her mental illness and uses it as an excuse to treat everybody like garbage. My older half-sister came to live with us in December. She claims to have severe depression and anxiety that she refuses to seek therapy for. She does not work, does not clean up after herself. She only leaves her room on the weekends to go out and party or go to concerts. During the week, she is in her room all day, only coming out in the evening to scream and swear at me and start arguments and some tension between everybody. She was prescribed Zoloft by a psychiatrist last month and only gave it a week to work. I caught her dumping the pills in the toilet and she told me to keep my mouth shut. When my mom questioned her about the empty pill bottle, she told her to get lost and to mind her own business. She stopped going to therapy last month because she thinks it's a waste of time. My dad deep cleaned her room last weekend because it was so bad. The smell of rancid cat litter was wafting downstairs and it looked like a war zone. My dad said there was moldy cups, rotting food, stinking dirty dishes everywhere, and disgusting clothes all over the place. Cat droppings and vomit all over the carpet. A litter box that hadn't been looked after and was never scooped. She sat on her phone and cried to him about how horrible her life is and how mean my mom is while he cleaned her room. It took him a few hours. She always cried to my dad about how mean my mom is anytime my mom calls her out on her behavior. She is very manipulative and uses guilt trips on my dad a lot, especially whenever my mom points out my sister's behavior to him or whenever he tries to point out she's in the wrong. Then comes the waterworks, guilt trip and anger from my sister. You don't care about me because if you did, or even, and you wonder why I never leave my room. You wonder why I give you an attitude all the time. My mom thinks it's ridiculous that she can't clean her room, can't take care of her cat, can't work, can't drive, can't really do anything because of her anxiety and depression. But she can go out clubbing with her friends every weekend. She has jury duty selection tomorrow that she already missed once and refuses to get her car running so she can drive there because of how bad her driving anxiety is, and she doesn't know how to use Google Maps. She wants my dad to take her and pay for her Uber. This is all an hour away, by the way. An Uber is expensive, and she has no money to pay for it. She knows how to drive, she just doesn't want to, and tries to get out of it any way she
she can, as usual. My parents offered to drive her up to where the courthouse was yesterday, so she knows where it is, but she flat out refused to get in the car and started screaming at my dad that he doesn't care about her and accused him of wanting her to get into a car accident or something. Today, he prepaid for an Uber so she can get there and is going to pick her up on his way home from work tomorrow. He is sick of arguing with her about it and doesn't want her to get arrested for not coming. Her car is sitting by the driveway and is completely dead. She refuses to call AAA and have them come out because she doesn't want to deal with it. I've noticed she always loves starting drama and loves to blame everyone else for all of her issues. She told my mom the excuse for her going clubbing was the therapist recommended that it would be good for her to get out of the house and she's forcing herself to do it. And my mom was like, so you can force yourself to do that, but not anything else? That's absolute garbage. My parents argue about her every day. My mom thinks it's all an act and she just doesn't want to grow up. Where my dad really thinks she is struggling mentally and feels bad for her. When she lived with her mother, she was calling him almost every day crying about how mentally abusive her mother was and begging him to let her move in with us. My mom was reluctant to have her move in because she knows how she is. And my parents argued for a while about letting her move in until they both agreed on ground rules for her staying here. But that went right out the window after she moved in. My dad always feels bad for her for some reason, always caters to her and takes her side with almost everything. She also bullies me every day. She is mean to my face. She mocks me, makes fun of me, takes pictures of me, and bullies me online with these. She made hate accounts spreading malicious lies about me online and trashed my name on Twitter and Instagram. She deleted the accounts and denied ever doing it whenever I bring it up to my dad. And she tried to blame it all on me. She takes pictures of my mom behind her back and does the same thing. We didn't do anything to her. She's always hated us for some reason. It is inappropriate to use your mental illness as a weapon to then sling at other people. It is irresponsible to do that. And in no universe is that a credible excuse for being a garbage human being. This individual needs therapy and they need a serious wake-up call. It sounds like this girl's sister needs to seriously have some kind of intervention because the way that she's treating her family is absolutely unacceptable. A possible solution for the original poster is to record every interaction with her sister, especially where she says anything about her dad. He needs to hear everything about what she's doing because clearly the mom as well as the original poster are not getting through to him. And it seems like if the dad were to open up his eyes and see what is actually happening behind the scenes, then maybe some actual progress might be able to happen. An entitled mother demands I give up my electric scooter for her child. So for some background information, I am a 21-year-old male and recently had surgery on my knee due to it dislocating at work. Due to the surgery, I have to use crutches to move about, and that makes it hard to go shopping. So I went out grocery shopping with my parents one day at a local big-name store and decided to use one of the electric carts that are provided in the store. Now, I'm a bigger guy, 6'5", around 300 pounds, so I have a gut that shows when I'm sitting down. Regardless, these carts are slow as molasses and get in people's way. Thankfully, with crutches in the attached cart, people tend to get out of the way and occasionally ask what happened. I don't mind and will tell them. Now, unfortunately, an entitled mother rounds the corner while I grab some toothpaste and other bathroom supplies. She is dragging a whining child about 10 years old, and I can see the entitled mother pause when she spies me in the cart. I decide to pay them no attention and begin slowly moving down the aisle while asking them to please move to the side so I don't accidentally hit them or anything. The daughter does so, but the entitled mother decided that me in this cart was a problem. She ends up saying, "You don't look like you need that cart, so how about you give it to my daughter? She is tired and needs it more than you." I pause and stare at the mother before responding, "I do need it actually. I just had surgery on my knee a week ago and can't really shop while using crutches. If your daughter needs this, then there's some at the front of the store still." She goes on to say, "You don't look injured, so I think you're lying about needing your crutches. You're probably just too lazy to walk around." She then attempts to move me off of the machine via force. It didn't work because I'm a tad stronger than her and also sitting down. I say, "Please do not touch me. If your daughter needs somewhere to sit, there are also benches scattered all throughout the store that she can use. Get away from me." She says, "No, you are going to get off your lazy butt and give me that cart right now." She says this practically yelling at this point. Her daughter, by the way, has wandered off down the aisle and is touching random stuff. Thankfully, her being loud has drawn the attention of a few other shoppers, and one of the store managers is walking about. They actually end up walking by and saying, "What seems to be the problem here, miss?" The entitled mother says, "This jerk is refusing to give me the cart and is lying to people so that they can pity him." The manager looks at me and I just lean down to roll up my pant leg. You can also clearly see
see that my knee is significantly more swollen than my other knee and is kept in a straight position so that I can't bend it. I say, I'm not lying. I have crutches that I can use, but shopping with crutches isn't easy. By this point, I had rolled up my pant leg and revealed the bandage and the bloody kneecap that I had. You can clearly see the scars and the stitches poking out the edges of the bandages. See? I'm clearly not lying. As the manager is about to say something, the entitled mother pushes him aside so she can stand beside my knee. The entitled mother doesn't like that I clearly wasn't lying about the surgery, but still thought I was. So to prove I was lying, she decided to drop her purse on my bad and revealed knee, which caused me to grab my leg and curse out in pain. She says, "Liar, you are clearly faking that reaction." By this point, the manager had flagged down some of the other coworkers who grabbed the security and had to escort her out the building. The manager then asked me if I wanted to file a report against her, which I didn't because I just wanted to go home and ice my knee to prevent more swelling. Some people are absolutely crazy. If I was this guy, I absolutely would have filed a report against her. There would be nothing stopping me from getting the police involved. That woman assaulted him. Knee surgery is no joke. It can absolutely take you out, so using these scooters sometimes is absolutely necessary. And the fact that she was physically trying to drag him out of the scooter, all because she thought he was faking it or he was just looking for attention, is absolutely atrocious. Someone else's medical reason for being in a scooter is nobody's business but their own. And if I were that guy and I had that kind of interaction and I had been assaulted like that guy, I 100% would have called the police. An entitled Karen complains to city council and runs a business out of town. This is something that is actually happening right now currently in my life. A little backstory for you before I actually get into the story. I have two friends who have recently closed down their business to relocate elsewhere due to what is happening currently. My friends who had this business for over a year now were not living in my town locally, but they gained the trust and friendship of most people who were local. They welcomed anyone and everyone who stepped in and were always willing to stop by for a chat if they saw you on the street. Now to get to the real story. So basically, I had found out from my friend, who is one half of the business, that they've been receiving constant complaints about many things. One being a parking space outside of this shop, which my friend would normally use for her car. And a few of the locals were whining about this and going off about them hogging said parking space, which nobody had used before anyway. The second complaint I had heard about was the fact that there had been a bench outside on the sidewalk, along with a flower trough full of lovely flowers, which was in fact bringing more color to the area. And somehow from what I heard, one specific local then complained this to the local council, when the local council in fact does not own the sidewalk, but it belongs to the landlady who owns the property that my friend was renting from her business. What makes me laugh is that nobody actually uses the sidewalk anyway. Everyone tends to walk on the other side from that. This walkway is blocked by what looks like two barriers, one or two cars owned by people who think that it's alright to park at an angle at the end of the sidewalk. I've also seen cars that are actually halfway parked on the sidewalk and the road at the same time, and they're complaining about a bench and a few flowers. This is not the first time it's happened either. My landlady used to own part of the building, and she'd have complaints filed against her for having flower troughs on the same place of the sidewalk, which I will repeat, does not belong to the council. Doesn't this seem like a double standard to you? Myself and other supportive locals couldn't talk these nice people into staying permanently, but they have made the decision to remain open from Wednesday up until the end of May as a last goodbye sort of thing, which is honestly a shame. What is wrong with people? These people literally just put a bench out and some flowers to try and bring some kind of variety to the area. And the fact that they're parking in a public parking spot and people are complaining about it is kind of disgusting. How entitled do you have to be to complain about something that you don't own and that you don't use? It's absolutely ridiculous, and it really sucks that these people are being driven out of a town. I've lived in small towns like that where the local businesses suffer because of everybody else's complaints, and it's not a pretty sight. It's typically the type of town that will never grow because of these people. And if I were a business owner, I wouldn't want to be in that environment either. My boyfriend betrays my trust by holding his female coworker at a party. My boyfriend and I have been dating for about a year. Last weekend he had an after-work party and he said I was free to join, so I did. He has a female coworker slightly older than him
who he plays tennis with every week. They seem to often write on Snapchat too, because there's often a notification from her whenever he shows me something on his phone. So at this party, we had a good time. We were both drinking, but moderately. We both aren't fans of getting super wasted. When we started getting towards the end of the night, we were sitting around a campfire. I was sitting next to my boyfriend and his coworkers on the other side of him. I went to get some drinks, and when I get back, he has his arm around her, and she has her arm around my boyfriend. I told him directly that I wanted to go home, and I asked him about it in the car, and he told me she started putting her arm around him, and he wanted to, quote, play along so it doesn't get awkward. I felt so very hurt, and what made it worse was that it was his first ever move that he did on me when we started dating. He put his arm around me, so this especially leaves a really hurtful mark on me. What do I do?
This does not look good for the boyfriend, if I'm being completely honest, because it does not sound like this is the first time this has happened. Who just plays along with someone else just putting their arm around you, especially someone of the opposite sex? This guy has a girlfriend, and supposedly this female coworker is just a friend. I don't know of very many friends who would get nice and cuddly at a work party. It seems super suspicious. And it's pretty interesting that this female coworker waited until this guy's girlfriend left to then make a move on him. There's no excuse to try and say that he was just playing along, because that is not a good excuse. And I don't blame the girl for having some kind of response to this. My entitled dad is demanding that I give him my salary. This is a true story, and it's about my dad. I might sound like a bad person talking about my own parents in this way, but it's true. I'm no angel, and I had a rough life. To be honest, my childhood was also very rough. The relationship between me and my father was really bad. I'm the second child, and I have an older sister. Apparently, my dad wanted another daughter, hence he started avoiding me from the day I was born. Like, he didn't even show up to the hospital that day. So my mom had to go to the hospital alone, give birth to a baby, and come back home with this new baby, which is me. He avoided me so much that whenever my family would go shopping, everyone would get something with them. A cloth, some toffee, or anything they wanted. I, on the other hand, would not have anything. If I asked for something, he would slap me in the middle of the road or inside the shop and throw a loud tantrum, as if I was trying to ask to do something illegal. So let me come clean here. After a few years after I turned 8 or 9, I did start arguing back. I started to push him to the extremes to make him feel what I felt, but he would handle it all the same way. He would yell at me or slap me. Even until this day, I have social anxiety because of the experience that I had. Not only that, he loved throwing away my stuff. When I was young, I had a hobby of collecting stuff. My oldest memory is of me collecting shells from the beach. He would throw everything away, saying that it was worthless. I started collecting stamps, and he used all of them to send letters to his friends. I started collecting coins, and then he would throw them away in the toilet. I started collecting fossils, and no, I'm not kidding, these were actual fossils. He would wait until I would fill up a bucket with all kinds of fossils, and then wait further until I was trying to get them verified, and then he would throw them away. I gave up fighting with him at that point. I was around 13 to 15 years old at the time. I thought that if I could bear a few more years, I could get my own life with my own rules. When the time came for me to go to college, he wouldn't let me choose my favorite course. I was forced to choose IT. I'm not completely regretting that, but it wasn't my choice. I just agreed and moved forward. He went abroad for work after that, and I thought I could live my life after that. But he doesn't let go of me that easily. He gave his number to like everyone in my college, my roommates, my classmates, my professors, and he would investigate me every day. If I didn't respond the way he liked, he would send my sister to get my mobile phone and make me realize what it's like to be lonely. After 4 hard years and 1 year of training, I got a nice job that I've always looked up to. In January this year, I got my first salary. I wanted to have some fun with it, like having good food in a nice restaurant with some friends, going on a hiking trip, or anything really. That's when he shows up again after all these years, giving me everything I wanted. He'd have my food on the plate before I could get to the table. The water heater would be on hours before I go to the bathroom for a bath, and stuff like that. My mother, being the kind-hearted angel she is, warns me that he's doing it to get money and nothing else. And just like that, a few days later, my dad comes to me and demands that I send him money. Like I said before, I was still a trainee. My salary was still very low.
no, so I refused to pay him. He was working abroad, so I was sure he already had a lot of money in his account and could use his own money. But that's when the blackmailing started. My grandmother, sister, uncles, and everyone in the family insisted on me paying my dad because family comes first. So after a lot of arguments, I decided to take the hard way around. I did end up paying him, but I did pack my stuff up and I moved out. I disconnected from my father completely. Now I live alone, just a few minutes away from the main headquarters of the company I work for. The story doesn't end there. He called a few days ago, asking me for more money. This time he says no matter how much I get in my salary, I should send him this money every month. If you're living with your expense, you know that's not possible. To put that into contrast, I don't make that much a month, so I couldn't possibly pay and give him money as well. So I just decide to ignore him for a few days. I've made up my mind. I'm not paying him a penny after this. Even if it means that the money would save his life, I would rather let him die. If the money is for his funeral, I'm going to let his body rot in the open. Like I said, I'm not an angel. I've suffered in life, but that doesn't mean I'm going to help my oppressors be a good hero. Everyone should own up and pay for what they are worth. So yes, the money is mine. I'm saving the rest of the money, and no one has a say over it except for me. Good on this original poster for getting out from a toxic family. It does not matter if it's family. Toxic is toxic, and that family was incredibly toxic. From the get-go, this father was absolutely abusive to this child and refused to have anything to do with them. And now that they finally have their own life where they can do whatever they want, they then try to insert themselves back into their lives just to try and take more money. Not acceptable, not okay, and I think the original poster is in the right for choosing to do this. Today I messed up by opening a bottle of hot sauce that had been in my car for 3 years. Almost 3 years ago now, I left a job, and for my leaving gift, I was given a multi-pack of hot sauces as a joke. I hate spicy food, and I can't handle it in any way, shape, or form, so I would never put these to use. I put it in my car to drive home and immediately forgot about it. Over the next 3 years, the pack somehow slid into the space under the back seats, and I finally found it today when cleaning. The many months in a hot car had not been kind, and the hot sauces looked weird and discolored, so I thought, hey, let's clean those bottles out and recycle them. That seems like a great idea. When I went to clean the last bottle, the lid would not budge. I fought, hit, tried to force the lid open, and after many unsuccessful attempts, I lifted it up to see if maybe there was extra tape I hadn't noticed. Cue this exact moment for the pressure in the bottle to finally give. The lid flew off, covering anything in the vicinity in a thick layer of expired 5 chili heat habanero sauce, with my eyeball getting hit at point blank range. My big stupid eye blinked as a reflex and smeared hot sauce all over my cornea, and the pits of hell came forth to claim the next victim. I have never experienced burning like this, and hope never to again. No amount of cleaning, milk, eye drops, anything would save me. And upon screaming at my partner for sympathy, he just hysterically laughed at my plight from the doorway. After using up an entire carton of milk, I accepted defeat and looked ahead to my life, which would forever be aflame. After a brief and unhelpful phone conversation for medical advice, I am now huddled miserably on the couch with an eye covered with an ice pack covering the entire left side of my face. It is several hours later, and if I move my face too much, the burning comes back with renewed fury. My partner giggles every time he looks at me, and unsurprisingly, I'm not quite in the mood for the offer of spicy food for dinner. Also, as a side note, my partner did help and did not just leave me to bounce off the walls alone like a trapped bee. But in the end, I can't blame him for laughing, as the whole scene was utterly ridiculous. I'm personally not a fan of hot sauce either. Anything above a jalapeno pepper and I'm gonna be on the ground writhing. I just can't handle spicy food in any way, shape, or form. So I cannot imagine having habanero sauce splashed into your eye that has been marinating in someone's car for 3 years. The pain, I can only imagine, must have been excruciating. So this person learned a very valuable lesson that you gotta probably clean your car out more than just once every 3 years. Today I messed up by letting my toxic family back into my life. They're completely unaware that I won the lottery several years prior. together. So some backstory. I am the youngest of 5 children, and we grew up in absolute poverty. My mom loved having kids, but she didn't work, and dad didn't make enough to support everyone. I was poor enough that I remember as an 11 or 12-year-old receiving a single plastic slinky and being absolutely thrilled I got anything. Growing up with that kind of family was rough. Parents got divorced, and dad lived locally, but didn't really do much to try and be a dad. Just support financially when legally necessary. And he let it slip once to me that he never really wanted kids. He just loved my mom, and she wanted kids, so we went along with it. Obviously, with this kind of dynamic and the lack of resources, home life wasn't great prior to the divorce. I was helping fix drywall at like age 5 because we could only afford to live in crumbly, run-down houses. I remember stripping paint with a steamer and putty knife at about 6 or 7, and only learned recently that the house had lead paint. My oldest siblings did even more housework and probably inhaled a bunch of lead dust and toxic substances. Couple that with the emotional abuse of our parents, and they didn't grow up to be good people. My oldest brother had anger issues and got kicked out of college for fighting people. He also got arrested a few times for stuff involving theft or violence. My oldest sister struggled with substance abuse, got arrested a few times for it, and even ended up involuntarily committed for 72 hours once. She's doing a lot better nowadays, but still she's an unpleasant person. My next brother went on to just be an employee at a large chain store, where I think he might be a manager now. All 3 still live in the impoverished town we grew up in. My next sister and I are close enough in age that we're very similar. We both joined the military to escape the poverty trap of our hometown. I joined the army and she went to the Navy. Even at about the same time, while in the service, we both pieced together a bunch of things about our siblings and parents that made everything clear. It was like we both had half of a connect the dot puzzle that made no sense. And when put together, the outcome was a big sign that said, "Everyone in this family is awful." She confronted them about it after her military contract ended and kind of got dragged back into the drama all over again. She moved to a city near the hometown about 1 hour away and started working there right away. I cut everyone else out of my life. I haven't spoken to most of them in years, and the others are cursory or obligatory in nature. After my contract ended, I started college using the GI Bill, which not only paid for my tuition, but also paid a monthly housing stipend so I can focus on my school. My family hated that I was basically getting free schooling. I could never explain that it meant giving up 4 years of my life for active duty, and I had to drill every month in the reserves, and part of my body is permanently wrecked. To them, it's just an unfair advantage. While in school, I had a habit of buying a lottery ticket every month when the GI Bill hit my account. It was borderline superstitious, as I never had any notion of winning anything, because I remember a statistic once that said men in California have a higher chance of actually being Brad Pitt than winning the lottery. During my final semester of college, I did end up winning the lottery. I didn't win screw you money by any means, if you know what I mean. I won the type of money where you could pay cash for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with 0.36 acres in the country, where housing prices were below the national average, and then have nothing left. Yes, it's specific because that's exactly what I did. I never told any of my family, including my cool older sister, because as much as I love her, she would almost be obligated to tell the rest of the family. The purchase of that home happened when I was 25, so 11 years ago at this point. Since then, I got married and I had a kid, and I have had an all-around nice and pleasant life. About a year ago, my oldest sibling was going to be near where I lived for work, and she wanted to visit so she could meet my daughter and catch up. Against better judgment, I agreed, because my wife wanted to know more about my family, who she had never met before. My sister was staying with us for 3 days before she had to go for her work stuff, and spent the whole time just reminiscing and catching up. At one point during dinner on the second night, she asked about what mortgage must be like, since she paid $900 for rent or something much similar, and with no yard. My wife scoffed briefly, unaware that my family didn't know about my financial windfall. My sister, though a troubled individual, is no dummy, and picked up on that. Her tone shifted from casual to serious and asked, "What does that mean?" I'm not great at lying, improvising, or doing anything without excessive planning. I sat stupefied while trying to figure out what to say before my wife said, "Well, he used his winnings to just buy the house," thus setting off the chain reaction of questions that culminated with my sister finding out I had made 6 figures for free while attending college for free and getting rent paid while not doing anything. She was absolutely livid livid and left for a hotel. About 2 hours later, the phone calls began from every member of my family, accusing me of cutting them off so I wouldn't have to share this gift from God. The sister I even got along with got angry at me for keeping a secret, but she understood that it would have put her in a bad position of lying to the whole family. My phone, email, and wife's phone began blowing up for the next week while family tried to get money from me, not understanding that there wasn't any left. They kept saying that they're about to file for bankruptcy because of debt and I could save the family, but I'm just being selfish. After a week, lawyers got involved because my family started threatening to sue for damages for everything wrong in our family. And in fact, they eventually did file. Every single thing that could even remotely justify going to small claims court or a full lawsuit was brought up. They even added up an estimated amount of gas money I borrowed since starting to drive at 16, with verbal agreements to pay you back later, taking into account inflation and current gas prices. Everything together they asked for would have just been short of buying another house in cash. I'm able to post about this now because I was about to get 90% of it dropped for being absolutely ridiculous, and showing that a lot of their claims occurred during a time when I had no contact with them. Thank you phone and email records. The remaining 10% of what they wanted was stuff that happened when I was 17 or 18 years old, like denting one of their cars or injuring them when I threw an empty beer bottle and leaving a permanent scar where glass cut them. After lawyer and court fees plus paying damages, I lost a bit more than $10,000 to my family. The stress from the legal battle affected me at work, and when it got out that I was being sued by my family after winning a lottery, all my coworkers began asking for help financially. It got bad enough that I had to request a transfer to a different branch where nobody knew me. Now I'm having to sell my home I bought where my daughter was growing up in and move to a more expensive city were the other branches, all because I let my family back into my life. This story is crazy. This person has incredibly toxic people in their life. I completely understand why they cut off these people from their life and decided to try and live their own life. You think you have a great setup, you can live your life and do your own thing, but this person's family dragged them down so far. I mean, how entitled do you possibly have to be to try and stake claim over someone else's house, home, and money? This is a classic case of somebody's too lazy to try and change their future, so they go after somebody who actually has. And it doesn't matter that it's because of lottery winnings. They still worked very hard to get where they're at in life, and they did everything they could to get away from these toxic people. I'm so sorry they had to go through this, and I hope they find the best of luck moving forward in a new town, in a new city, away from those toxic, entitled, terrible people. Am I a weirdo for wanting to bring my puppeteering act to a festival? I am a 27-year-old man and also a puppeteer, and I have been since I was in middle school. Before the virus, I was a regular fixture to a local festival where I was joined by my sidekick. He's a Muppet-style monster, think Cookie Monster for scale, and we made regular appearances at the festival for roughly 5 consecutive years. We walk around, visit vendors, talk to kids, have photos made, and we've been announcers for the live bands in the past. Point is, we've done this a long time and people know us and love us. The festival is coming back for the first time since the virus hit, and of course I want to bring him. It'll be the first time we've been in the crowd in at least 2 years. I was talking to my mother and saying how I was going to the festival and was hoping to bring my monster and do our whole little shtick. She replied, "Why would you bring a puppet to a festival?" Now, I love my mom, but that really hurt my feelings. I tried explaining how we've been doing it for years and we're practically a fixture of the event, but she basically shut me down and said things like, "That's weird," or "That just looks strange." I feel really insulted, and now I don't want to bring him even though I know people will ask when they see me without him. Now I'm starting to feel like this activity that I'm passionate about is really weird. Nobody's asked me to bring him, but after years of doing it, I kind of feel weird not showing up with him. Like I'd be disappointing my audience, especially the kids. Am I weird? Is my mom right? How do I stop feeling this way? My man, you are not weird. We need more weird people with puppets going around festivals making people laugh and smile. It is not strange to be a puppeteer. If Jim Henson were here today, he'd be saying the exact same thing. Jim Henson, for those of you who don't know, is like the guy behind the Muppets. So 100% do it. Bring your Muppet, bring your little monster, go to that festival, and you talk to every single person you see and you make them smile. And the best part about it is nobody's asking you to do it, so they will have no idea that this is exactly what they wanted. They wanted some guy to go around with a puppet and make some funny jokes and get to know people. It's fun.
fun, it's a festival. It's better than showing up by yourself and disappointing people who are expecting you to bring that. You clearly have a draw behind this. You've been doing this for years. Who cares what your stinky mother thinks? Do your thing. Don't let anybody tell you what you can or can't do. This is your art and you love it, and other people are gonna love it too. An insane Karen tries to sue my parents for over $1 million. This story happened in the mid-90s, spanning 2 years. I was 6 or 8 years old, so the details aren't fully known, but the story gets told by my parents every so often. When I was 6, we were in my dad's car coming home from work or daycare. I can't quite remember. My brother was about 10. We were in the back seat of a 2-door Mazda. We were fighting in the back seat while my dad was stopped at a red light. He turned around to swat at both of us, again, early 90s, to make us stop. His foot slipped off the brake and we rolled forward into the car in front of us. My dad says my brother asked if we hit something. Both cars pulled off in the shopping center, and this lady went into full hysterics, demanding an ambulance. And when the paramedics arrived, she insisted that she needed a neck brace and a backboard. My dad saw the writing on the wall and stayed behind to make sure the police got his full side of the story. And then the first thing he did was call the insurance company to tell them what happened. They had people out the next day to take pictures of the car and take my dad's statement. Sure enough, not long after comes the lawsuit. $1 million for crippling this woman for life. Thus began a 2-year-long battle with lawyers over the stupid fender bender. I know it took a long time, and that my dad often ranted about how she rejected the first settlement offer of about $30,000 and then later rejected the second offer of $50,000 because she was a greedy, lying, terrible person and wanted a full court hearing. By the time we got to court, my parents had separated, but since they were married at the time, they were both on the hook for the money if they lost. I was too young to go to the hearing and was promised it would be long and boring anyway, so I had to stay at a daycare. My brother got to go though. It was long and boring right up until Karen herself got up on the witness stand and gave her version of the supposed wreck. First off, she used a walker and wore a neck brace to get to the stand. And then, to sum it up, she was innocently waiting at a red light when she checked her rearview mirror and saw a great big white truck barreling towards her, and she just knew there was no way it would stop in time, so all she could do was brace for impact and pray. My parents perked up at that, as did their lawyers. They got out a set of pictures of a blue 2-door Mazda and showed them to the woman and asked if she recognized the car in the photographs. She said no. The lawyer showed the photographs to the judge and jury and explained that this was the car that struck Karen. Pictures were taken within 24 hours of the accident. The jury did an audible spit take. When the dust settled, not only did Karen not get her $1 million, but she ended up having to pay the attorney's fees, lost wages, and daycare costs incurred as a result of the lawsuit. And that was how we got a free trip to Disney. Some people are absolutely insane and they will do whatever it takes to try and get money from someone else. Car accidents are absolutely one of the biggest ones. This Karen really thought she was going to try and pull one past the judge and jury, pretending like she's crippled for life and using some kind of walker. It is so funny that she got caught in her own lie, and it is absolutely wonderful that she had to pay back for all the miserable lies that she tried to spring on this family. It's wonderful to see that this story ended up being in their favor, and I hope they enjoyed Disneyland. An entitled Karen gets banned from a dollar store after freaking out because her kids stole from the store. A little bit of backstory. I'm an armed security officer at an outdoor mall, so I get a call from a dollar store where everything is $1. You know the one. Anyway, the manager calls me and says that a minor attempted to steal in the store and the mother is causing a scene with other kids present. So I arrive and walk in and see 8 kids and one mother all yelling. So I raise my voice and loudly exclaim, "Quiet right now." Well, Mama Karen turns around and tells me not to yell at her kids. I tell her that I apologize, but I couldn't follow what was going on, and would she kindly explain what was going on. She then proceeds to get an attitude and say that the store manager accused her child of stealing. I look to the manager, whom I've known for years, and say, "Ma'am, is this accurate?" She responds, "Yes, sir." The child, pointing to the child, has a candy bar and a drink. So I look to the mother and ask if she can ask the child to empty his pockets. She refuses. So in order to at least resolve the situation, I ask her and the children to step outside the store so that they won't be bothered by the staff or the store. In all honesty, this was just to get them out of the store. So now that we are outside, I get a text from the manager on our work phone that we carry, and it is a request to ban them from the store. This is something I was going to do anyways. However, I decided to take it a step further and ban them from the entire mall complex. I had the paperwork with me to do this and begin writing out the property ban and trespass warning for her. I ask
her name for my report so that I can take it up with corporate, and she seems very happy at that and gives me her name. I put her information in my report and the property ban and trespass paperwork. Just to clarify, I do have to notify property management of what I had to do, so I did not lie to her. So I tear off her a copy of the trespass and property ban, and she explodes at me.
You can't do this. You don't have the authority to do this. I'm calling the police. My husband works there.
So I politely tell her to make the call, and I will be glad to tell them when they arrive.
She makes the call, and about 10 minutes later, the police arrive with several officers. I explain to the sergeant that has arrived of what is going on, and he looks bewildered and says, "She is throwing a fit over that? Seriously?" He then goes to her and asks for her side. She starts waving the paper that I gave her in the officer's face and says,
This is illegal. He can't do this.
So the officer looks at the paper and then at her and says with the most polite and charming smile that is hiding a laugh, "Ma'am, this is valid, and according to this, you are banned from the property."
She screams and says, But how will I do my kids' shopping?
The officer tells her she will have to go to another mall, possibly 45 minutes away. She huffs and calls her husband, who arrives shortly. Comes to find out he does indeed work for the police department and speaks to me and looks at the paperwork. He then looks at his wife and says, "I will see you at home. We're going to talk about this." She then leaves crying with the kids. The husband turns to me and shakes my hand and tells me that he's sorry for causing trouble. 2 weeks later, I got an award from my company and the owners of the mall over the incident. First thing that comes to mind after the story is, what did the Karen actually think was going to happen? Her kid was caught in the act of trying to steal from a dollar store. Like, this is the least of her worries. The cops could have shown up and had them arrested for petty theft. So in all honesty, it sounds like her and the kids are getting off easy. And it's great that she tried to wave around that her husband's a cop, because even when he did show up after all this went down, he still reassured the security guard and the cops that she was in the wrong. It's unfortunate it had to go this way, but karma is so delicious in moments like this, because Karens like this will never learn unless it's absolutely shown in their face that they are in the wrong. So good on the security guard for doing his job, and good on the husband for saying that he's sorry, because there's no way that guy would have gotten a sorry from that Karen. My mother stole $32,000 from me. To set everything up first, when I was 8 years old, my mother set up a joint account with hers so that I could put money in and she could too when I was younger, and never got around to separating them. So I started saving money for university in 2017 after I got my real first job, and all my money went into that account. Only she could see the balance, which I liked, because I didn't want to know how much I had, because then I would want to spend it. I stayed back an extra year before I was supposed to go to save money as well. Now, my mother is the type of person who never wants to work again for the rest of her life. It comes time for me to get an apartment weeks before I'm supposed to go off to school. I check my account, and guess what? There's less than $1,000 in there. After years of saving, it's all whittled down to $1,000. So I ended up not being able to go to university because my money was gone right before I was supposed to start. My mother had told me the account had been hacked and she would call the bank and have it fixed. I sat down with a bank manager and we both confirmed that it was my mother who had taken all of the money out of the account. And this wasn't even all at once, but it has been happening almost every day since I had my first paper route when I was 14 years old. She stole a total of $32,000, and her excuse was that since my girlfriend lived with us, that she couldn't afford the bills. Yet when I showed her the paper evidence that she'd been stealing for way longer than the girlfriend had been there, she had nothing to say. My stepdad didn't care about the money either, because at least her half of the bills were paid. I haven't talked to them in 2 years, and don't think I ever will again. I wasted years of high school working full-time to save money for school, and then it had ripped out right underneath me. This is a horrific situation. Imagine working so hard all through high school to try and save something up for a college education, only to then have your mom rip it away from you piece by piece without you knowing. I can't believe that this person wasn't checking their account. I find it so difficult to believe though that this person did not check their account. I mean, I know they're just a kid, but I would definitely want to know how much money is in there so I can keep track of it, so I can see how much I need to save up. I feel so bad for the original poster, and I do not blame them for cutting their family out of their life after this.
I find this so funny because the chef was lazy just as much as the original poster, and it's nobody's fault. Like, seriously, I've been in jobs like that where it's like, oh man, there's nothing to do and I've literally completed my job for the list. I guess it's time to sit around and do nothing and hope that I don't get caught. So for the chef to turn around and be like, wow, you're being lazy, the time for slacking's over, that is so ironic to me because that is exactly what he was doing. So it's really cool to see that you gave him a taste of his own medicine. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.